What's going on, y'all? This is Alexander, and you are plugged into the Nerd Companion. All right, back at it, my fellow tower junkies. We have a part of we're part of each other's quartet in this tower journey, talking about book 2.
What's up, y'all?
I know him as Guyon. He goes by Guy.
Gay.
Cold question. In reference to the Dark Tower series, who is your favorite character and why? It can be anyone in the series. I'll go first and give you a chance to think about it. My favorite character was Father Callahan. Father Callahan. If for anyone that doesn't know, Father Callahan is a character in the Dark Tower series. He's in the later half of the series. But he's also a character in a book called Salem's Lot, written by Stephen King. And the premise of Salem's Lot is basically like a vampire takes over a small town, and a little boy, and I believe a photographer, or is he a photographer? It's like a little boy.
I'm not up on my.
I want to say the guy's like a writer or photographer. He does something with like media.
Okay.
And he moves in. It's like, meets a girl, likes the girl, and then it also follows a story of a little boy whose friends are being kind of abducted by this vampire, and somehow all their paths cross, and they end up finding the vampire. But inside the story is a Catholic priest named Father Callahan.
Yeah.
And he basically, at the end of the book, they all confront the vampire who's over the town. And Callahan, his whole life, has been very steadfast in his faith with God and with Jesus. And the vampire basically shatters his faith because, Callahan's coming at him with, all the stuff about, spitting scriptures at this vampire, stuff that in a fictional sense is supposed to repel evil in a sense, but is not repelling him. Yeah. And so the vampire is basically like, your God is nothing. You see, you've dedicated your whole life and it's nothing. And I read it so long ago, so the details of the ending is a little convoluted, but essentially Father Callahan ends up becoming a broken man. And he leaves, but that's essentially all you know.
Okay,
and
that's how the book ends.
That's a part of the there's the other characters that have because there's different characters,
right?
But
he's a part of the book. That's
yeah,
right. Yeah.
But in his sense, his story is that he's broken.
That's
because
wild.
He couldn't everything that he was told to believe and was told that was going to protect him and ward off evil had failed him.
Yeah,
and he can't determine whether it was because what he's believing in is not that powerful. Maybe he's wrong. Or maybe he finds that his faith in God and in Jesus wasn't real to begin with.
Yeah.
So then he questions himself. He's like, did I really believe in God? And maybe that was the reason why I couldn't do it. And he just has this introspection and he's just off into the sunset.
Yeah, it sets up, I had no idea that that's exactly how it happened in the book, because whenever he shows up in the Dark Tower series, and it makes it all that much more sweeter. They do give some a little bit of that tale and backstory in the book, obviously, but knowing that
they went into great detail.
Yeah.
And that's why that I really, and I didn't know I liked Father Callahan that much until you read it in the book and you find out what he did after that book. You're like, oh my God, dude, your journey was crazy.
Yeah.
And then to end up there at the quartet and then
become part of it in some sense,
and a sort kind of like a sense of redemption.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly, which is really cool that he gave him that redemption in a whole different thing. That's really sweet. But
magnified,
magnified for sure. But I had no idea it was like that because I don't know. In the theory I had, I assumed his story was more wrapped up in the thing. So it's really cool that it cuts off kind of on a bad note for his story, but it
Which I feel like is not uncommon for Stephen King.
Sure.
I feel like Stephen King is very comfortable with giving you the middle finger and shutting the book.
Oh yeah. No. I mean, he talks about that even like in some of his not preambles, but in some of the openings to some of the books where he's like, sorry that I left you on, this note, but it's like, here we go. Especially book 3 into book 4, I believe, but yeah.
What's your favorite character?
Hands down, I mean, without even thinking about it, was Eddie Dean.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
He's going to show up in this book that we're discussing, but it's multiple things. I'm a little brother. He's a little brother. It probably has something to do with it, too, but he's from New York. I'm from New Jersey. I just love his attitude. And, like, more than that, like, Roland has Cuthbert or Cuthbert, depending on how you pronounce
I like Cuthbert.
But Cuthbert literally is Eddie Dean. Like, they're the same person in there, It's almost like Cuthbert reborn, if you will. But, like, Roland needs someone to put him in check. Like, Roland says it multiple times. He can't think around corners. He doesn't see things beyond kind of like directly what's in front of him. He's very smart, obviously, but he can't think outside of like what he knows, right? So Cuthbert provided that thing. And yes, it's wrapped around this like comedic, annoying at times shell. But at the same time, you need that person in your group to round out all of your attributes, if you will. So Cuthbert to me and Eddie, they bring that for Roland because Roland is missing that. Not to mention he's just hilarious. His storyline, his redemption, his whole arc of coming in, which we'll get into in the book, and then where he ends up in the book is just so beautiful to watch. So it's like, it's a really cool, to me, just that one immediately stands out. Plus I'm an audiobook person. And if you go into book 2 with Frank Muller, that starts Eddie's voice. And he does it. He's such a good voice actor that like Eddie Dean's voice it's so New York and it's so just like, hey, it's just so good.
Okay. Follow up. If you said we're getting an iteration of the Dark Tower series as a series. I haven't looked into it, but I've heard multiple people confirm it. Who would you cast as the perfect member for Eddie Dean?
Oh my gosh. So originally, when I had done a full casting in my mind, like I can pull them up. But originally, I thought Aaron Paul would be a really good Eddie Dean because if you've seen Breaking Bad, he's like, "Hey, bitch!" Like he just has that like
gritty attitude
that I'm like. But I don't know now. Now I would probably want to like do a longer deep dive. I used to think Aaron Paul, and of course, at some point, I was like, "Oh!" When I first heard about it, I was like, "He'd be great for this."
He was Eddie Dean. I mean, he was Eddie Dean.
Like in Breaking Bad, he has a little bit of that like roughness to him, and he would do a redemption arc really well. I feel like
he was a good guy, just getting mixed up in some dumb stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But ultimately, his heart was there, and I think he could play that same kind of thing. I mean, it just kind of tied in. I didn't even think about the drug connection, but we'll get into that. Like Susanna, I always saw Taraji P. Henson. I don't know if you know that actress, but she's on like Empire and like you ever see Baby Boy with
I'm currently looking this up.
Yeah, you'll know her face when you see it. But
what's her name?
Taraji, Taraji. I feel like she would smash that role because you have to have like an ability to. It's very range. She's very like has a big range, and you need a big range to play Suzanne. I feel like she would kill that.
No, I can just knowing her performance is based. I recognize now who she is.
Yeah, Jake. I don't know. It's Jake. I feel like that could be whoever. Roland to me would be the one that would be so tough to cast, but. And it's funny because in the Dark Tower movie, which I still have never watched and I probably never will, when I saw Matthew McConaughey as the Man in Black, I loved the casting because I was like, man, I bet he can do it so well.
It was such a good cast. And Idris Elba as the gunslinger, like it's a good cast.
Yeah, I was like, that's a great cast. And Idris Elba as the gunslinger, I feel like he could bring that home. But even still now, like I would want someone who is more like, what's that guy's name? Sam something, that old guy who's got the really deep voice. His name's Sam.
You talking about the Marlboro guy?
I don't know if he's a Marlboro guy. He probably was a Marlboro man back in the day, but he's
on Roadhouse.
He's an actor. Yeah, he's on Roadhouse.
Yeah, the Marlboro guy. So, he's got the mustache.
Yes, him and a younger.
He's too old.
No, he's too old now. But him, like a guy who's got that kind of energy. If you've seen him in some of his roles, like who has that very beat down, very like been through way too much type of thing going on. And Roland is older, but it would have to be him, younger.
I think. Now, when I say this name, I mean in a serious role. Because he's played serious roles before, but Chris Hemsworth, I feel like could do it.
Roland.
Yeah, I think age him a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I've seen him in serious roles like Extraction.
Yeah, I need to watch that. I haven't seen that yet.
You haven't seen it? They're pretty good.
Yeah.
They're better than I thought they were going to be. Yeah, I feel like he could play a good Roland. And I'm thinking from big, like pretty movie star approach. You know what I mean? Like if they're trying to cast a glamorous cast,
sure.
Him for sure. I would have to give it more thought, but
yeah. Have you seen the TV show Preacher? It's based
I know
on,
what you're talking about.
The Marvel comic, I want to say, but yeah, highly recommend it. There's a character in it, and he's like a bad guy in the thing, but he's literally a gunslinger who's the bad guys, the villain, pull him out of a hell loop. He's stuck in this hell loop where his family's murdered over and over again, and he's a gunslinger. Like he literally looks like what you would think.
I'm sure that there was
like.
some sort of
It has to be. I'm like, they had to pull this out because it literally is like, and he's stuck in this like thing, and they pull him out to attack Preacher. I'm like, that actor, he doesn't really talk much. I'm like, that guy looks like what I would imagine Roland to look like. So that would be another one too, but I have no idea who that actor is. I think it's just a rando.
Yeah, it's funny you say Eddie Dean. So I got introduced to this whole series, I probably said it last episode, by a guy named Sean Roland, who I met in boot camp when we got out, because he would talk about this series a lot. And he knew that I really liked Harry Potter. And I think that was like the biggest series I read at the time. He's like, yeah, when you get out, you have to read The Gunslinger. And so I read it, and because he would talk about like, oh, my favorite character is Eddie Dean. I can't wait for him to meet him. Read The Gunslinger. I was like, he wasn't even there. He was like, oh no, it's in book 2. He was like, you're really going to like him. He's like, you and him are like the exact same person. That's what he would say. Because he was from New York.
Oh,
and
nice.
he was basically like, because I told him everything I went through in high school and cleaning up and getting, he was like, your story is exactly like Eddie Dean's.
Yeah,
and like the way that you act, where not to say you should, like you're not taken seriously, but you're always joking, even when the appropriate, like the time is not appropriate,
right.
but like it's typical Eddie Dean in the story. But I thought it was really funny. So yeah, I mean, now that you say it, I'm like, oh, why didn't I say it? It was like the obvious fucking choice.
Yeah, just his character to me is so full and funny, and like it's got all this stuff in it. Like I just love his character a lot. So.
Even from a creative standpoint, it was necessary to put a colorful person like that in the story, especially 100%. when you compare the book The Gunslinger, where it was not, it was just very, it was kind of straightforward.
Yeah,
it was very dry.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have been able to follow 7 books of just him going through that. Like, so yeah, the content was important.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, with that being said, what is some things that you liked about the book without getting too nitty gritty about it?
Yeah. As a whole, to me,
drawing of the three,
from a pure fantasy perspective, I just felt like it was such a cool idea. We'll get into some stuff with more detail, but some of the imagery, the action scenes, like to me, this book specifically has it all. Like the action scenes, which we'll get into at Balazar's. Yeah. So like the actual action scenes, so cinematic, the storyline, what gets opened up, the understanding of the worlds starts to get a little more detailed, just so much. It's such a cool thing. It's just like, it's Scarface meets Lord of the Rings meets Harry Potter. It's just everything. It's such a good story all in one. And to me, I feel like, and I have no idea, I'd love to hear Stephen King's perspective, but like from 1 to 2, like it's like he started to really see like, okay, wait a second, like we can go here with it. And it just like expands in such a way that's really, really cool. He probably already knew what was going to happen, but it's just so insane.
Well, I think that video I sent you, like he had this idea of the Dark Tower, right? Like this overarching idea, realized as a beginning novelist and beginning writer that he probably, if he wanted to put his grand story out there at a time where he didn't have enough attention, it probably would have just fallen on deaf ears, right?
Yeah.
So I think that he had the original idea, and then once he established himself, with the stand and stuff like that, that's when he was like, okay. And then I think what happened, the beautiful thing, with imagination, is that you start making connections. Right, and then he starts making everything that he wrote a piece of his giant project.
Yeah.
And you see it.
That's something I talk about in that video you sent, which was cool. Was like, instead of it being like, oh, from day one, I have this huge idea, he almost like, and it's a harder challenge, which proves how amazing he is, but he literally like wrote himself through all of these different books and like found a way to connect them all kind of off, saw it open up, which is insane to think about. But yeah, so that's pretty cool.
On a scale from 0 to 10, what do you rate it?
Man, this one to me is like 9.5. This is as close to as good as it gets. This is one of my all-time favorite books.
It's crazy. If you look on Dark Tower forums, would it be on Reddit or any other, platform fandom, this one rates really high.
Yeah.
I
agree.
People say that this is probably their favorite book. This is where I disagree. I like the book. It's not my favorite. But
what is your favorite, by the way?
Oh, man. I feel like number 3 is where everything takes off.
Number 3.
So you have number 1, right? Which I feel like, and people are going to shoot me in the face. I feel like you probably could just get a summary from a YouTube video. I don't necessarily think you need to read it. I don't think that there's too much there.
I don't disagree. There's some stuff that you would need to know, but yeah, a summary would give you that. You don't have to read through it to get the full.
I feel like they could have trickled a lot of Gunslinger's story into the Drawing of Three, like in Times of Recollection, where he's like waiting, or if he's like pensively looking into a fire before he gets to another door. You know what I mean? Like I feel like they could have did that, which they probably will do for the show.
Right, like I said, show needs to do 1 and 2 as one season. Don't do 1 as one. It can't work that way. You have to do 1 and 2.
Those need to be pensive recollections.
Yeah,
they don't.
I like that idea. I like that idea. It would be cool if like the whole first part was a recollection, like the town part was all just in his mind, and then it comes in and then slowly goes back and forth. I think that's a great idea, actually.
Yeah.
We need to get to these freaking producers and say, hey,
we ain't shit.
Let us be consultants.
I think book 3 is where it takes off for me, but my favorite is probably, and everyone's probably least favorite, was Song of Susanna.
Wow. Okay.
And I remember a lot of people like, Song of Susanna sucks. I was like, damn, that was actually my favorite.
Wow.
I just feel like the pacing was good.
Okay, pacing was good.
It was the pacing, the entire...
It's intense the whole
I didn't
time.
feel like there was like any lulls. Like every page had a purpose. And I was just, dude, like, yes.
It is intense.
And it wasn't crazy long. It was like 500 pages, 500 to 700 pages long. It was like a good medium-sized book. And it was just good throughout. It was really weird in places where I wanted to be weird. And then I don't necessarily care to have action scenes explicitly like explained to every detail, but he did it, and it also was just executed in a way where I didn't feel like my imagination was very forced through a specific keyhole, if you will. No pun intended. But it
lets you kind of build the world
a little bit. It gave me a little bit of wiggle room to kind of imagine it, but he showed me the important parts of the sequence, I guess, that needed to be shown.
Nice.
But
that is an interesting pick. Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that one, but it is a great book. I do like the book. It's a little, I don't know if it's something about the song part of it or something about it. It just doesn't rank up there.
Was there a song in there?
I mean, the whole time is like it's just like in this book, there's shuffle, and it keeps shuffling because it's the drawing of the 3. Yeah. And then in that one, it's like, it keeps doing Oh, Susanna Mio, daughter of mine, Parked a Rig and the Dixie Pig in the year 99. And then each one is a song like chapter where
I'd never picked up on
some
that.
little like poem that alludes to, I think, what happens in the thing. Yeah. That is the song of Susanna, if you will. But then they say it again later that like her song is something else.
All right. Well, I'm gonna give it a. I'm really harsh on ratings, but I'm gonna give it a. I'm gonna give it probably like a 7.7.
Hey, that's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a solid score. People that say, "Oh, 7.7, that sucks." I'm like, not really. I mean, I don't give anything. I don't ever give 10s. I don't think I've ever given a 10 on anything.
You got the Simon Cowell thing, I'm more the Randy Jackson, American Idol. I'm like the nice, like, hey, it was great. I'm like, no, that was shite.
That was shite. That was average at best.
Average at best.
It's not even his accent. Okay. Well, I would say definitely a change of pace from The Gunslinger.
Big time.
I feel like
Big time.
If anyone's going to be talked into reading the series, if you're a fast reader, you can get through The Gunslinger pretty easily and very quickly. I'm a slow reader. It would take me a month with the little pockets of time that I have to read it. It's like 300 pages. If you're a fast reader, you probably can get it down one day.
How many pages?
I think it's like 300 something.
Wow.
No, The Gunslinger.
Gunslinger. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I think that The Drawing of the Three, the second book, really changes the pace and definitely gives it color where The Gunslinger didn't have, in a sense.
100%.
So I think I enjoyed that part of the series, but
Yeah.
Let's get into it. Spoilers are now coming. You've been warned. If you don't care for spoilers, then just go ahead and listen through it. If you don't want to hear spoilers, read the book and then come back. But this is the curtain call. All right. So from the get-go, from the absolute get-go, so let's kind of recap what happened right before. Roland just had his conversation with Walter, okay, the man in black, the man he was chasing down in the desert. And he kind of, he basically tells him that Well, you explain it.
Yeah, so he has his, for those who have not listened to the first podcast, go back and listen, show us some love. But he basically goes into this long detail where the Man in Black lets Roland dive at him, and he sends Roland into this universal perspective, deep space mind meld of seeing kind of, I guess you could call it like a mind fuck, not to curse for the youngsters out there, but he basically sends his mind through this, shows him what the universe is to some degree, right? That basically brings Roland, I wouldn't even say it brings any perspective. There's a little moment in there where he sees something deep, but that'll come later, but he sees something very small, as the universe is expanding around him. But basically Walter shows him all the universe expanding, shows him how insignificant he is, in the universe, and basically like fries his mind to some degree of,
because he's an idiot. Well,
yeah. Well,
imagination wise,
right.
He can't fathom anything that's not concrete.
Right, yeah.
Anything abstracted melts him.
Right, and I think it'd probably be the same for a lot of us in the sense of like we couldn't even imagine.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to be able to have that conversation with Walter. Like, what are you smoking, and share it.
Yeah. But exactly, so that kind of is where it ends, basically. So after that, Roland comes back. Walter, I think they say 10, I forget how many years have gone by, but that's something to fact check. We talked about it, I think, in the first
So, yeah, that's what it says. Yeah, it says 10 years have gone by or something like that.
Something like that.
And then all that remains is a skeleton.
Yeah,
that's presumed his corpse.
Right. So it's part of the whole thing now where the tower is crumbling and time is weird. So if you're wondering, how does Roland, lay there for 10 years, sleep for 10 years, if you will. Time is very strange now, but 10 years have passed since Walter sends him onto this universal like mind meld while they're having conversation. He comes back and Walter's just a skeleton, and Roland kind of gets up and decides to walk towards the beach because they're right on a cliffside, basically, like the way I understand more or less. So he walks down to the beach, falls to his knees.
And that's the end of the book.
That's where it ends.
So immediately opened up in the drawing of the three. And I can't remember how many pages into it, but we're pleasantly introduced to da-da-ching, da-da-chum,
da-da-ching, da-da-chuck, da-ma-chum.
Da-da-chum. So it almost seems like they're questioning.
Yeah, and that's what they basically say. It's like,
they're always inquiring about something.
Yes,
like they're always trying to gather data.
Yeah,
like they're
exactly.
almost like machines.
Exactly. So
what do we see here?
And they call that, I believe, I'm just looking at the chapters. It's like the sailor. So I think that is starting with Roland there. But anyways, it wakes up with him on the beach, and presumes it starts literally at the end, which he does with all the books. They start off where they end, and literally.
He's not even he doesn't even wake up in a rhythm. Like he doesn't, like his cycle, he doesn't wake up naturally.
That's
he's
what
waking,
it is.
Something wakes him up.
Yes, that's what it is. So he's asleep. He falls asleep literally at the end of the book, and book two comes back, and he's asleep still technically, but he starts to pull himself from his sleep, which is Stephen King does a great job of describing that like deep sleep that we're all in, where you kind of hear something in the distance or feel something in the distance.
It's almost incorporated in your dream.
Yeah, exactly. It's like one of those things, and he gets pulled up, realizing I believe it's the water that's hitting him, and his gunslinger mind immediately goes to, oh my god, your shells. If his shells get wet, they won't fire.
I forgot about this part.
So he freaks out and he's like, oh my god, the shells. And then all of a sudden, da-da-chum, da-da-chum, these lobstrosities. And if you get the chance, go online, Google lobstrosities Dark Tower, and just look at the drawings of them, because they are freaky as you could imagine. They describe them well in the book too, but basically you would see this giant lobster creature that's like half lobster and half like mutant, like freaky creature running at you with insane speed.
So is it described how big they are?
I think they give them the size. I don't remember, but they do give them the size in the book, because Stephen King wouldn't not give us that.
So basically what you're looking at is basically like a humanoid form, or I don't even know if they're humanoid form, but they're giant lobsters, okay? Bear with us. They're giant lobsters. Well, no, I'm just, because there's like many different, I'm looking at a bunch of images, but they all seem, I mean, they're just like, they're abominations. If you think of like anything, I was thinking more like, Lovecraftian abomination creature, like not just a lobster walking up to you with like a humanoid face talking. I'm talking like, there's like things that don't belong on that body that is on that body.
Yeah.
Like, And
it should be, judging by the way it sounds, like it would be 3 feet, 4 feet tall. Like it's not a small thing at all. It's like a big creature, not your size. But
you can't push it over. Like you need to run. It's
Yeah.
not like you can just kick it.
Yeah, like it's not a little crap. This is a big boy. So basically, he comes to and he kind of sees the creature, and just imagine exactly this little fast little, because he sees it kind of getting close, and he's like, "What is that?" You know, like for a moment, and before he can even start to come together, to my recollection, it runs at him fast, and I believe the first thing it strikes down is his boot, and it hits him in the foot, and immediately chops off the front of his boot. So whatever his crab, lobster claw is, it literally just slices straight through the boot, and I believe a piece of his toe comes off with it as well. And I think they allude to that a little bit later. But anyways, immediately he's like, oh my God, reaches for the gun. The creature comes down again. I believe it's coming at him this time. He reaches his hand up, and they just say he feels a flash on his hand, and he's immediately lost fingers.
Which fingers?
Now, he loses his first finger. You're going to have to remind me on this, and I hope that you have the info, because I don't remember, but he loses for sure his like shooting finger.
Yes.
And then
his middle finger, my favorite finger.
He loses like multiple fingers, like his
middle and his index.
His middle and his index.
On which hand?
On his right hand? On his
dominant
strong
hand.
hand. Now, of course, he's a gunslinger. He can shoot with both, but imagine a gunslinger losing their finger. So
he just lost half of his offensive
power.
Yeah.
Stephen King starts the second book of 7. This just drives me crazy, but also excites me.
He permanently maims
the main character. Yeah, he just takes off his fingers. Like, what's happening? That's like Game of Thrones level, like shock right there. Basically.
Yeah. So let me say by this is that this was the first book series where I read where your protagonist is permanently maimed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Permanently affects his ability to do his job for the remainder of the story.
For the entire remainder of the story.
Prior to this was like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings.
It's like, what is this?
We're like, I mean, Frodo was definitely stabbed by a witchblade, for which he was cursed forever, and why he had to go to the land of elves. But at least at the end of this, like, he was able to do it.
Yeah, it didn't affect his ability to be Frodo, basically.
Yeah.
He was no less Frodo than he was rolling his. I mean, if you imagine, like, he wouldn't even probably be able to become a gunslinger if he had one hand. Like, he have to, it's just like, what do you do with one hand? So it's just insane that.
Well, you could find a way. Just because you're a gunslinger, you could have a different weapon.
Once you are a gunslinger, yes. Yeah. But I mean, if you were a child in his time,
he's taking gunslinger to the quite literal sense. Like, I will use guns. Yeah. I am a gunslinger.
Right. In those times, you could use the other stuff for sure. But if you were to actually try in Gilead, I don't even know if they would accept you if you had one hand, because they would expect you to keep up with the rest of the class. So
you could prove it if you could make the case. I'd assume you'd be like, okay, let's see.
Roland's character, like he would do it, which he does make do, obviously, because you have to, and he's
in the remainder of the
story. Got his focus on one thing, as we know. So yeah, that was really, really intense. Blows my mind. So basically, finger comes off. He's like, oh my freaking God, what do I do? To my recollection, he is grabbing at his other gun. His hand is bloody, so his natural reflex is to go for his gun. He reaches for his gun again with the bloody fingers. The gun slips right out because there's no finger to grip. So gun falls to the ground. He's like, oh my God.
I can't feel my fingers.
He grabs the other gun, loads it in with shells, trying to stumble. If you imagine bloody hands, like, just trying to get shells into your gun.
Which is very uncharacteristic for Roland because he's usually calm, cool, collected, and in control.
Yes, but if you're waking up into this moment and it's just like getting punched in the nose, like you don't know what's happening.
Do you think that this is a character flaw?
In what sense? Like
that he's a gunslinger. What do you think? Was there an explanation in the beginning of the book? Because I'm now trying to tear down a curtain here.
Explanation of
he's a gunslinger and presumably one of the best, right? Mm-hmm. If he's not the best, then he's certainly noteworthy because he's traveled many years, survived many years. Mm-hmm. No telling what stories have happened between Magus and in the desert.
He's the best. He's the youngest to pass the test. He's the GOAT for sure.
So how did that happen? Like, what do you think? Unless we're missing a detail, did he shoot and there was a misfire? Is that what happened? Because I know that was a theme in this book. Was that, and I forgot that even happened. Mm-hmm. And I remember it now that you said it. That his guns and his ammunition were submerged underwater. Yeah. So now his guns are fine, but the munitions are not. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think. Like, did he just make a mistake, or did he fire? There was a misfire, so he couldn't kill. But he in his head anticipated that it would be the kill shot, and he wouldn't have to worry about drawing his hand back from an attack. Like,
no, the first thing that happens to my memory, and either his fingers or his boots go first. But because what happens are the creatures are way faster than he thought. Because if you imagine, it's like you just see this like lobstrosity's rolling up, and it's far enough away that it's no danger, no immediate threat. But then he says he moves so fast, he was like, oh my God, like if you imagine just like at you super fast.
So he made a mistake.
So he makes a mistake in judging that. And then when he puts his hand up, I think to like shield, finger's gone immediately. It just eats his finger, just slips it off and just starts to eat it. So that's how that happens. And I think maybe right after that is when the boot comes off, and you basically see, because he's got like, imagine like a steel toe boot, tops right through it. It's like, okay, this thing is not messing around at all. So I believe that's how we start that. And the whole reason it's happening is because he's groggy, waking up on the beach. And then to my recollection after that, he's firing the shells. A few of them don't work because they're wet. And then eventually he hits a dry one, shoots the lobstrosity, pulls himself up, gets onto the beach, gets far enough away. Now, the lobstrosity, as a side note, whenever the tide rolls in and there's noise, the lobstrosity's arms go up and they freeze. They stop moving.
Okay, so I literally am just looking at this.
Yeah, they're like listening for basically sound.
It's called the honor stance.
The honor stance.
That's what Roland says.
Yes. Okay.
He calls it the honor stance.
Yeah, which is something that comes from, their time of.
It says they assume what Roland calls the honor stance when the waves of the ocean come in. The honor stance is when they hold their claws up in the air. This stance is held until the waves wash over them. The lobstrosities also appear to be more vicious at night. Okay. But,
yeah.
All right. That's funny that you just said that, and that's literally what I.
Yeah. They're rolling out at night every time. So like during the day, you don't even see them, but at night they start rolling out of the waves. Like the waves, if you imagine the waves come in and they just start coming out, like that's when they come out every time. It's never during the day. They're always fine in the day.
So during the day they are present. But they're in honor stance.
No, during the day you don't see them at all. During the day they're back under the water. They're in the water, and at night they start coming out of the water onto the beach shores.
Midnight Marauders.
Yeah, and then every time the waves come in, they freeze for a second, and then when the waves recede, they start coming again. So that kind of
so they move in cycles. So when the waves are up close on the shore, they stop.
Mm-hmm. But I think it has something to do with them listening or something like that. I'm not sure. I guess they see you though.
That's what it was that threw him off. Is that he thought maybe they were docile when they stopped, but then when the wave receded, it was like the gunshot went off and he went to the races.
Yeah, like it was just insane. So that sets us up for that. Now, this is when you mentioned earlier, like what you like and don't like about the book. To my recollection. And I just went through the books again because I'm a psychopath for the time. I'm a tower junkie.
You're a tower junkie.
But the first time I read it, the first few times, I always felt like this scene between him and getting to the first door was forever. But I think it's because Stephen King does basically like almost like a montage if you're reading it in a sense, like where it just felt like it was longer than it was. So on this last read, I don't think it was as bad as all that. But basically... he starts to realize that he's getting poisoned by the lobstrosities. Whatever's in them, it's like slowly poisoning him.
Yeah, I think so. But I also think at this point that he's probably got an infection.
Yeah, he's in fact exactly.
Yeah, like it cut through bone. You're looking at bone infection.
Yeah, that's very true too. It's
like there's no telling what what that lobstrosity was digging into.
Exactly,
all sorts of bacteria.
Yeah, got some ocean bacteria in you, buddy. But yeah,
some of that Galveston Gulf.
Yeah, if he was in Galveston, he's definitely got some toxicity for
dead.
sure in his bloodstream. Yeah, he died.
He wouldn't have made it to the first door.
Exactly. So going back to the end of the first book, the Man in Black shows Roland 3 tarot cards, and the first tarot card is the Prisoner. And it's a man with a monkey on his back, and you can see the monkey gripping into his shoulder, and the man just has this grimace of pain. The second tarot card is the Lady of Shadows, and then he says something about like, ooh, she looks something, doesn't she? I forget what he says exactly. Then there is the Pusher, who is the third. And I forget what the image is of the Pusher, but we'll get there. So basically, he shows him these cards. Roland doesn't know what's going on. The Man in Black loves to make fun of Roland for him not having any understanding.
He's always like trying to be cryptic on purpose.
He is,
like,
yeah.
Really just trying to piss him off.
He knows Roland doesn't know shit about shit. He knows he's not one who would think beyond what's in front of him, and he just loves it. Just makes him so happy. So basically, and we'll skip ahead. There's scenes of him like fainting, almost passing out, getting up, walking towards the beach. He's going down the beach now. He's just traveling down the beach. And I'm sure there's plenty of little details here. It may even go back to some stuff in the past.
Because time is definitely different there too, right? Like, unless I'm making that up in my head, like time is not the same over there. Like he's not able to, or maybe he's just fatigued because there's no water. Or there's an element that's got him off of his game.
Yeah, and that's
other than the fact that his two good or better fingers are gone.
Yeah, and that may be when the shuffle stuff starts. It for sure happens after the first door, which we're coming up to. But basically, Roland is walking down the beach, and this part reading felt like it was taking forever, but really they're just going through him going down this beach side, trying to walk his way towards whatever's next. And as if you imagine if you had like a really bad fever and were really ill, how he would look, he's basically looking like a zombie at this point.
That's what it is.
He starts to see something in the distance, and it's a door. So when he sees this door, he's like, okay, what's going on here? There's a door, if you imagine literally like a door, no frame, just standing in the middle of a beach, like on the side of the beach, on the side of the ocean. So he walks up
because he also describes this door where like because he's confused, right? And he looks at the door and he even walks around the door, and it's still just a door. Like it's there's nothing on the other side of this door. It's just like if a door is just planted into the ground, just sitting there by itself.
And even crazier is when he walks past the door, it disappears. So when he leans his head past, like literally, if you like saw the door, perfectly perpendicular, and then you tilted your head a little past the door, it disappears.
Right.
So he's like, what?
Okay, yeah.
So when you go around the other side, the door is completely gone. But when you come back, the door is there. So immediately, magic door, something crazy. The door standing in the middle of the beach is just wild. And he looks and he sees on the door, it says the prisoner. So it's like, okay, now we know something crazy is going on here.
Just as it was prophesied.
Just as it was
prophesied.
Prophesied. Yeah.
Is that the word?
Prophesied by the wizard. So
I'm an idiot.
And to me, this is like this is one of those things for me. I'm like, please make this into the show. Like, this is just such a cool idea. So he opens the door, of course, because he's like, that's naturally what you're going to do next. And that ties you into the next part. The chapter changes after he opens the door. But when he opens,
is my favorite part of the book.
To me, it's one of the coolest freaking parts. But if you imagine you open the door and what you're seeing is
he sees
through another person's eyes.
Yeah. So he sees our Earth. He sees our Earth from up high.
Yeah.
And immediately like starts screaming.
Yeah.
Which is weird that this shook Roland. Out of all the weird things that he's seen up until this point,
sure.
He opens up the door, and I'm not sure, maybe you can tell me, is he like looking at basically like a door-shaped TV screen, or is he opens it and he's now in the eyes?
He's in the eyes.
Okay, so he opens the door and he's now seeing through somebody else at this point.
Yeah.
And what happens is whenever you open a door, whoever opens it is unconscious. I believe like their body drops.
No, so when you open the door, they're still there. You're watching them do your thing. When you walk inside, you become them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get there.
But even more than that, there's levels beyond that, because once you're inside their mind, Roland has the ability to basically step backwards in their mind and let them take over.
Right.
So you're basically sharing a mind with someone at
Gotcha.
this point.
And he can control as much or as little as he wants.
Exactly.
Which is weird that he just picks up on how to do that.
Right. Well,
was that a lane that
I think it also took him a second to understand. He almost like learned it as it was happening, because when it first happens, if you imagine like you're literally looking through someone's eyes, so he sees down. He's looking.
It's literally you're playing the first person game,
right? And the
prisoner's literally what you're doing.
It's literally that the prisoner's currently looking out of a window. So in his mind, he's seeing what's out of the window. So he freaks out, slams the door.
Well, he freaks out. So whenever he screams, Eddie, who is the person he is looking through that we now meet, hears the scream in his head, and he's like, "What the fuck?"
Is that okay?
Yeah. So
you're
no, he
heard
it, and he's going, "What the fuck?" And it is noteworthy at this time, and I'm not sure how long it takes for them to describe this, but Eddie is a heroin addict,
yes.
Right? And he has not done heroin in a bit. Like he's off of his routine of his use with heroin. So he's probably withdrawing a little bit.
Sure.
And he's not 100% himself. And he hears that. And so he's definitely like geeking on this plane.
Yeah.
Right.
He's freaking out.
And so some characteristics about Eddie, as we probably discussed before, Eddie he's described as, taller guy. I imagine he's probably average height of 6 or 6 foot.
6 foot, 5'10",
thin from his, junkie days. Like all he does is consume heroin. So he's probably, not taking care of himself, but I think he's he still has a place to stay, right? It's not like he's homeless, right? He's not like
No,
he's not
he lives
dingy,
with his
but
brother.
yeah, he lives with his brother Henry, and they both they have a very close relationship, and he actually really loves his brother Henry, looks up to him, and it was, if I remember correctly, it might have been Henry that got him involved with drugs to begin with, I believe.
It may have
because
been,
Henry's worse off.
Yeah,
at this point.
Henry's worse off. Henry's like a full-on junkie with no hope.
Yeah,
basically, like you
and
said.
Eddie is quickly on his way.
And Eddie's on his way, 100%.
And so Eddie, some of his characteristics is that he's sarcastic, he's colorful, he's loud. One of the things that I thought was really cool that stuck out to me is that he called cigarettes coffin nails.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's
and it's
fun.
cool to say that because it's like every cigarette you smoke is like another nail in your coffin.
Yeah.
Like it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very gangster ass thing to call a fucking cigarette. Like that's who he is. And I think that's what's awesome about authors is that as wise or as sarcastic or as deep or as romantic as the characters are in the book, that is your author.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like the sarcasm you see in Eddie is Stephen King.
100%.
The one thing I love about reading is that like, oh my gosh, like some of these characters, like, if it's done correctly, like these characters are, I love them so much. It's like you're really falling in love with the person that's writing this book because like that's
within them somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, he's a very colorful person, and it's noteworthy that Eddie is a good guy. He has a good heart. You don't know this yet, but he has a good heart. He's just a prisoner to addiction.
Yeah, he's a full-on prisoner.
And so that's where we kind of see the doors are basically labeling these people that he is now introducing himself to,
right? So
in a supernatural way,
right? So we know for sure, okay, these doors that's what it's going to get. Now, of course, we get our backstory at this point. So, to my recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but I believe it goes into Eddie's story. Now, Eddie basically is currently on a drug run for
Balazar.
Is it Federico Balazar?
It's Balazar. He's the boss.
Yeah, and I can't remember his first. I think it's Federico, but. Basically, if you imagine this mob boss, he's one of the higher up. He's part of one of the crime families. They kind of give a little detail of this, that there's like multiple crime families. He's the head of one crime family, and they decide to send Eddie on a mission because A, for one, Henry could never do this, and B, this is something that you wouldn't send your guys to do because it's basically this little drug run, and you don't want to get your
could be a suicide run.
Could be a suicide run.
And Balazar's probably looking at him as like, I don't care if I lose you. Yeah, I don't care if I lose you.
Yeah. So he sends Eddie, and he knows Eddie's just enough with it to get the job done.
So do you know why Eddie is even doing it to begin with?
I don't remember the why.
So he's doing it because Balazar has now held Henry hostage.
That's right.
So Balazar has got Henry, his older brother, who he loves very much, basically hostage in basically one of his warehouses, and basically told him that he's got to run this. You got to be a mule for this cocaine to bring it in, and if you do, you can have your brother back, which I assume is just repeatedly going to happen over and over again.
I'm trying to remember, though, because I don't think... Because this is just a jump forward, a quick moment. When he lands back, I believe they tell him that they have Henry. And he's like, where's my brother?
Yeah, no, he knows that. Yeah, he knows that.
Okay, so he knew it beforehand.
Okay. Yeah. So he knows.
I was trying to remember why exactly he was there, and I was like, I feel like they bring up Henry. Once he lands, they say, we've got your brother, and then he freaks out. But I guess they'd already said it or something.
Well, maybe my details are off, but I'm assuming that he's got a drug problem, right?
Yeah.
And there's many ways you could probably manipulate Eddie at this point, right, whether it's his love for his brother or using his addiction against him.
Yeah.
If it's cheaper to pay an addict with a little bit of your product that he'll come back for,
exactly,
to do a job to get you more supplies.
Yep. It's
genius. It's absolutely terrible thing to do to somebody, but it's genius. Mm-hmm. It's a classic villain genius move. Mm-hmm. And so Eddie is now in this position where he's got kilos of cocaine under his armpits. And I want to say it's in between his legs too. Like they're taped on to his appendages, basically. They're just taped onto him, like under his armpits. And he's just kind of like sweating on this plane. I imagine he's like sweating. He's like not feeling good. He's probably in pain. He's withdrawing from heroin.
Yes.
And he's got, he's got cocaine strapped to his body that he needs to bring in. He's freaking out.
Yes.
So his anxiety is already probably high from withdrawing.
Yes.
He's not in a good position.
Yes. Now they give you a little more backstory beforehand, which we'll give a quick little run over. So they basically say like, okay, so the chapter moves once you see Roland opens the door and screams. Then they give you the backstory of Eddie. So Balazar sends him down to Miami or something like that. He meets a guy from England who's his dealer. Eddie's cool, calm, and collected. He calls this dealer the sallow thing, which is a good word I had to learn, a nice SAT word, but basically the sallow thing. He's like a little like drugged out, little like sweaty, evil little guy who's trying to fuck Eddie over basically for these drugs. And this is
I don't even remember this. Go ahead.
So he goes to the hotel and he's sitting there waiting, does a little heroin, and he's waiting for the guy to come. The guy shows up.
Just does a little heroin.
Just does a little heroin.
Casually.
The guy shows up trying to basically he tries to screw Eddie over on the deal. So he gives him this boo-boo heroin. And if you remember, Eddie's like, dude, like this ain't going to cut it. But it's partly why they say
Eddie
Balazar
knows.
picked Eddie, because they were like, hey, he's cool enough to be cool under pressure. So he's like, bro, you can either give me the good stuff or I can have Balazar send his guys down and clean you up, basically. And the guy gives him a little look, pulls out a knife and tries to act hard for a second. Eddie still talks him down. And this kind of shows his bravery, even though he's a junkie. You can kind of see, okay, he's got some bravery.
There's something there.
Him. Yeah,
there's some fortitude there.
Some fortitude for sure. Eventually convinces the guy. The guy leaves, waits an hour, comes back with the good stuff. So they give a little backstory. That's a tiny little bit of just info on who Eddie is. He gets strapped up. If you imagine, like Alex said, taping cocaine around your whole body to go to an airport. This is back in the 80s
or 70s, right?
This is 80s, yeah. So if you watch like movies like Blow and stuff, people were going through airports and stuff all the time. So it wasn't as crazy as it would seem now. Where it's like they didn't just scan your body, but he has it all tapped.
You would think that there'd be like a bag or something, but it was like because in movies you see them like in suitcases.
Yeah.
Like if you watch Narcos,
yeah.
But even
exactly,
that was probably like more privatized, but they're in suitcases. Like everybody was involved. But yeah, he's just like, it almost seems like a menial amount to bring back.
I mean, I guess at the time you could bring back,
but I don't know how much that how
you could
much
tape
money
on
that
yourself.
is.
Yeah,
maybe it was pure uncut, and then they were going to cut it.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, it cuts back now. So that's where he is. He's on the plane, and you imagine, like Alex said, you're in that moment, and then all of a sudden, someone jumps into your mind for a moment. And how they first do it is a time skip.
I don't even think he's aware.
He's not, exactly. They first do it as a time skip. He's seeing something. He's looking in one direction. Then all of a sudden, he's looking in a different direction. And he's like, "What?" And he realizes like he just lost a bit of time because
like
Roland had come forward. Yeah, just seconds. Roland had come forward in his mind, and that's how you realize, okay, wait, Roland has the ability to take over Eddie at this point.
So he's losing. Yeah, so he's losing like these little seconds of consciousness, and that's because Roland is sitting in his head. And he's basically taking control of Eddie, kind of like a first person game, like a first person shooter, or he's basically in first person. He's controlling Eddie, and he's learning that he can lean into it and control him more. And the more he controls him, Eddie kind of slips out of consciousness, or he can throttle back, sit back in the theater a little bit, and have Eddie go through it, and Eddie's fully aware. So there's this inversely proportional mechanic of consciousness that Eddie and Roland have to kind of delicately dance around.
Yes.
Mainly it's Roland that has to dance because Eddie is, whatever.
He's unaware at this point.
So,
and as a side note too, when Roland comes forward, his eyes change to Roland's blue bombardier's eyes. So whenever he rolls forward, if you imagine, it's literally it's Roland's eyes whenever he's conscious.
And so basically he's sitting in the seat in the aircraft. A stewardess comes by, asks him if he's all right, because he obviously looks like he's in distress. He's freaking out. He's DTing on the plane. He's sweating. He's like looking around. And the stewardess asks him if he's all right. He immediately gets paranoid.
Yes.
And he goes into the bathroom.
Yes.
Because he's like, I gotta fucking go. Like, he's freaking out.
Yes.
Like, he's like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
So he just like goes into the back, right?
Yeah.
And obviously the stewardess is probably like, okay, I need to bring this up to someone's attention. This guy's acting weird.
Yes.
So he goes into the bathroom and he's looking in the mirror, and I think he's like splashing water in his face because he's trying to like wake up, keep calm.
Yes.
But when he looks in the mirror, he sees that his brown eyes turn blue.
Yes.
And then it goes back again. So he's probably like tripping.
Yes.
And I think this is the first time that Roland reaches out and says, hey,
yes. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I'm inside of your head.
Yes. So instead of coming forward, Roland basically imagine is like in his mind now and is like, hey. So he hears something talking to him and he's like, what the fuck? In his Eddie Dean voice, and starts freaking out because now Roland comes forward in his mind and starts telling him like, hey man, like I'm in here, like listen closely. And basically if you imagine, Eddie is not like, and you'll see this as it goes on, but whenever he joins into someone's mind, there's almost a moment of discomfort and a battle that would ensue. Eddie doesn't have that as much as the two characters that we eventually get to in a second, but Eddie basically talks to Roland. He freaks out for the moment like you would. Roland tells him, because Roland has gunslinger's eyes and can see everything happening. He's like, hey, listen up. The stewardess,
he has a lot of perception.
He has a lot of perceptions. Like, the stewardess caught on to, like, you're acting weird. Like, and he knows, he can reach into Eddie's mind and see and learn what's happening. So he reaches into Eddie's mind and realizes what Eddie's doing, that he has drugs.
He can even feel, I think he can even feel that he's like
nervous and all that. Yeah, I'm sure. So he's telling him, like, hey, you need to calm down, and basically tells him why he's there and what he's trying to do. So they go back to the seat. They sit down, and throughout this time, the stewardess is noticing something is a little funky. She tells one of her other stewardesses, hey, I noticed something's up. And of course, Stephen King's the best at kind of giving you character, like, background. He gives you deep dives
real quick.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, like, that's what he does. Like, real quick.
Yeah,
like,
real quick.
Spring it in there.
Just a quick little thing so that you kind of learn who this character is. He's so good at that. So basically gives you a quick backstory that she's, been trained up and taught by her captain, like, hey, if you see something, say something. And that she's basically what you would call a gunslinger's mind, where she's on alert and she is, in her own way, doing her job well. Being vigilant. So she's already just going to keep an eye on him. And Roland, smart enough, is just good enough to see, wait a second, she's doing a second and a third look. So he can see all that with his eyes. He's very, very aware of what's going on around him. So they go back to the seat.
So at this point, Eddie Dean has come out of the bathroom. And what has happened at this point inside the bathroom in the aircraft?
So Roland had told Eddie Dean basically what's going on. He explains, he's like, shut up, listen, I need your help. He knows, he can see what Eddie's doing, what he's trying to do. He's like, I know you're carrying these illegal things. He doesn't know what it is. He's like, I know you're carrying something for a man, because he can kind of reach into his mind. Eddie turns around because he's looking around, and when he turns around, I believe he sees the door to the beach. So imagine you turn around and, like, almost like directly behind you, there's a door that is wide open, and on the other side is Roland's body laid out. Because whenever you come through the door from that side of the world, your body goes limp. So literally, if you imagine, like, when Roland walked through, his consciousness left and he just dropped. So he's sitting there and he's like, I have to get myself, sustenance. He's like, I'm in a bad way, basically. So they go back to his seat. The stewardess comes up and asks how she can help. Roland looks up and she sees the blue eyes, of course, and he reaches into Eddie's mind because he asks first for a popkin, which is the gunslinger's version of a sandwich. And she's like, what? So he learns then, he's like, reaches into his mind. So we learn, okay, he can reach into your mind and get information, gets the name sandwich, gives it to her. She's like, oh, okay, yeah, give me a second. She gets him a sandwich. And when it comes back, Roland's sitting there and he's like, I need to try something to see if I can eat this. So basically what they say is he squeezes his hands together, like almost like you're trying to squish the sandwich, and it goes back into Roland. So Roland's able to grab it literally
through the door
and gets it to himself so he can eat. So he's getting that sustenance. The lady comes back and the sandwich is immediately gone, insanely fast. So she gets more suspicious. She's like, are you done already? Like how did he eat the sandwich that fast? And I think it's just in her own mind. She's already got an alert on him and stuff. So she decides to tell her stewardess what's going on, tells the captain, hey, I think we have something going on here. Something's very strange. And at that point, they've built up like, okay, we know like this guy's probably up to no good, basically. So they talk about her getting ready with a coffee pot. She puts a coffee pot on to get hot water because she's like, I'm going to throw it at him if he tries anything. I'm going to like,
do they think like he's like potentially going to hurt people
or something, or he's a drug guy. They know something's up. So, and it's probably a hurt people kind of thing. It's probably like a terroristic threat or fear that they have. So she's getting ready to do that. And right before she can, he gets up and runs into the bathroom because now that they've learned, hey, you can transfer things into the other world. Eddie explains to Roland, dude, I've got all these drugs on me. And Roland tells him, hey, they're becoming aware. He's like, well, what am I going to do? So they make this plan, go into the bathroom. We're going to take off all the drugs and we're going to just squeeze him in like you just did and bring him to me on the other side of the beach.
So I missed that the first time. I thought he like threw him, like I thought he taped him behind the toilet or something. And that was always a plot that was like, well, how did they not find it? Because yeah. they clean the yes. aircraft. So how would they not find the coke? But I guess the guy was gone. Okay, but
yeah.
Okay,
so exactly. So now that they learned because he did the sandwich thing, is like, hold on, like we can.
Stephen King has established rules and mechanics exactly. of how this works. So now it makes sense.
Exactly. So now he can just basically squeeze these drugs, into the other world. So they run into the bathroom. The lady's like just about to have the coffee pot on him. And she's like, okay. So he goes into the bathroom as a plane's getting ready to land. And she's like, sir, we're getting ready to land. You need to come out because she knows something's up. But he just stays in the bathroom. He's like, give me a second. So imagine all this duct tape. It's duct taped on him so hard that there is no way to get it off, basically. Like they're like trying to get it off. And basically this leads up with the whole like moment of like suspense because the plane lands. He still hasn't gotten off the drugs. they tell everyone, they talk to each other, and the captain says, let's let everyone get off. He's not going anywhere. It's going to be fine. And then we'll get him. So they're letting everybody get off the plane. And as soon as everyone's off, they start banging on the door like, sir, you have to come out now. Like, we know something's up. Like, it's okay. Like, come out. Just trying to get him out. If you imagine they're trying to open the door this whole time, they're trying to rip it off. And I don't remember how they get out, but I think he just ultimately just starts to like rip it with all the pain of ripping tape off your body. They get it all inside to the other world. So now it's completely gone through his mind, his consciousness into
basically
the other
put it
world.
in like a tear of reality, essentially.
Yes, exactly.
And
now it's on the beach with Roland. So now all those drugs are on the beach with Roland. So they're there. Eventually, now he knows everything is fine.
They open a door and he's acting like he's pooping.
Yeah.
He's like, what is the deal? I'm pooping.
Yeah.
Like, he tries to shift it on them.
Yeah.
Like, basically gaslighting them.
Yeah.
Like,
They're so mad because they're like, dude, we've been yelling at you for the last like 20 minutes as we're landing. Like, what the hell? So they
I've got the heroin shits.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
Exactly. So obviously they got the TSA, the police are there. Everyone's
DEA
there.
also.
Yeah. They pull him off in handcuffs. He gets carried out of there. You know, they literally, I think they say like they carry him off hands and knees, like just like lift him up and just carry him out because they're sure that obviously he was doing some kind of drug smuggling. They obviously clean up. They test the toilet. They test everything underneath the, where the toilet goes. Yeah. They test everything. There's no sign of drugs anywhere, but they're just so certain they do. So they make him take his clothes off. They see tape marks on him. Like, well, what are these red marks? And he's like, I don't know. He says some funny, clever thing because Eddie's an asshole. Yeah, he's a total smartass. So he's giving them a hard time
because he knows there's no drugs. Like, he knows like he's good.
Yes. Now in the back of his mind, Eddie realizes my only problem is Federico Balazar's gonna think I'm a snitch because he didn't get through customs immediately. So obviously it wasn't a smooth transition, and he's been in there so long now, he must have turned on me.
Right.
So he's like, okay, but they give you Balazar's world. He's in his little castle. He likes to make little card castles. He's at his little restaurant making card castles. And they talk to him, and Balazar's like, okay, go there, wait, let's not assume anything. Let's get him first. I want to see what's going on. Eventually, Eddie comes out, but
the limo is left. Like his ride.
That's right.
So, because they got spooked.
That's right. So he gets in a taxi cab, takes a taxi down to his part of town.
So this is a part that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So Roland is watching all of this in a cab.
Yes.
And I think at this point, again, Roland's like, I need something like to eat. I need something because like he's maybe that tuna fish sandwich, whatever, wasn't enough.
Yes.
And I remember he stops and gets a hot dog.
Yes. Yeah.
And a Pepsi.
Yes.
And aspirin.
Yes.
The necessities for dimensional travel.
Yeah. Exactly.
And one of the reasons why I don't like this book is because he had a Pepsi.
Why?
We
Not
all know
a Coke?
that Coke is superior.
That's accurate, though.
What is this? Ryan Barrows' house?
Yeah, right, dude.
I'm just kidding.
That's a deep cut for y'all who don't know.
So yeah, I thought that was funny. So he lets Roland, Stephen King lets Roland have the New York experience. The soda, the pop, the dog.
Yeah, and it's a really cool scene because if you imagine you come from the night times, right? You don't have sugar like that. So when he drinks the soda, he's like, gods, what is this?
Yes, he did freak out.
He falls in love because he's like, this is so good.
And it's got caffeine in it too. So I mean, I'm sure he's stimulated.
Oh my God, yeah. He's never had that much sugar in his life. So he's like, what is this sweetness? He's just like in love. I forget how he says it. It's so funny that he's like freaking out over soda. But he also gets aspirin, which they don't have in that time as well. So the aspirin's a fever reducer, and he's obviously got the sick fevers from whatever infection he has. So he gets what he needs, eats the hot dog, enjoys the hot dog as well. Now, Eddie's smart enough to know that he has tails on him. So they release him because they can't do anything. And just to wrap that up, when he's in there and they're like, obviously like, are they going to let him go or not? Eventually, Roland comes forward in Eddie's mind and scares them all away, all the police. Because you imagine he's like in a white room with cops and DA all around you. They won't let him go. They just keep questioning him with the same questions. Eventually, Roland comes forward with his Roland voice and is like, now you must release me. And like, they all get like freaked out. Like,
yeah, okay. Like I know my rights, dog.
Yeah, like, so they let him go. And then he gets there, goes to the taxi, gets Roland all the stuff he needs, and eventually gets home. And right before he gets to his doorstep, Balazar's van pulls up. And inside of it is, God, I forget his name. Now I want to remember it so bad. What's his name? Big Ugly. Long, tall, and ugly. What's his name? He's Balazar's right-hand man.
Jack
Andolini. Thank you so much. Jack Andolini. He's Balazar's right-hand man. He pulls up with another guy. Forget his name. He's a peon. But he tells him basically like, hey, we got your brother. You need to come with us. need to come
Okay,
back
so
to
they snagged up his
Balazar's.
brother once they feel like something went south.
Yeah, that's exactly what I remember. It's like
Okay.
something like that. It's
I imagine that scene. You remember Old School?
yeah.
When they're trying to recruit all the college kids,
Yeah.
and they roll up in that black van, and it's like Metallica, Master of the Puppets. Get in the van, get in the van. That's what I imagine. It's like he's just going up and like bam, 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 get in the van.
And if you imagine, it's so mafia-esque, so they're basically giving the strong arm, like, you need to come with us if you know what's good for
Gonna
you.
come see the boss.
Yeah, literally one of those kind of things. So they take him away, and what's cool is while they're on the way, they pull up, and of course everything revolves around the tower. The Balazar's place I believe is called like the Tower of Pizza or something like that. It's a pizza restaurant.
There's always like these little, not really subtle because they're obvious, but there's like they sprinkle in these. I don't even want to say Easter egg either because it's not really, but it's like they're giving you the obvious connections between other worlds and what Roland is trying to do.
Yeah.
That of which the tower.
Exactly.
Like you'll still see a lot of these tower references in almost everything you'll see.
Right.
It's like the concept, me and my wife are on a cruise and you see people every day, but like on the second day you meet like another person and you talk to them. And then every day on the cruise, you notice them all the time.
Yes.
Like, oh, I see you all the time.
Yes.
But it's like only because you
started
made aware.
to see it. Exactly. Yeah.
So now you always see
it. It's like what they call like the red car theory. Like once you buy a red car, all you start to see are red cars.
Is
like
that
it's something like that, where it's like, yeah, it's that exact thing where like eventually you'll see in the book, there's a lot of those kind of things. But basically, they're on the way and just a random scene because it's called the Tower. There's a sign, like a neon sign. It's like, the Tower restaurant, and Roland sees it from behind Eddie and jumps forward, takes over Eddie's consciousness and starts freaking out because he sees the tower and he's like, the tower!
We've made it.
And yeah. And at this point, Eddie is actually starting to get comfortable with like Roland and like understands like, okay, like we're going to work together to like figure this thing out. Obviously Roland just saved his skin with the police and everything. So they're kind of got like a mutual acceptance. So he's like, calm down, dude. Like, it's not what you think. Like, relax. We're here. So they get there and they go inside. And this is, to me, just one of the coolest scenes of all time.
While Eddie is being courteously transported to Balazar, a scene cut happens, and it's Henry, Eddie Dean's older brother, who is with, I'm assuming, Balazar's goons. And, it's probably safe to bet that Henry at this point is probably really intoxicated. Definitely with heroin, and he's just kind of barely holding it together. They're, playing a messed up game, and they're asking him questions, and if he gets it wrong, they're like, they're physically hurting him, like they're punching him and stuff like that, I believe. And so for every question they ask, his answer is always Johnny Cash. And they could be like, who was the first person to land on the moon? And he answers, Johnny Cash. Who was the famous chef that did this? Johnny Cash. And it gets to a point where they all start laughing at him, and it becomes funny because, he's, his only answer is Johnny Cash. And he was also known, Johnny Cash, the singer, was, known to wear all black, right? And if you think about who Roland was chasing in the beginning of the story in The Gunslinger, it's the man in black. And it leaves...
Interesting side note.
Yeah, so I wouldn't know if that was intentionally done. But I was thinking how weird it would be if maybe the man in black had influenced his life in such a way that he went kind of like a self-destructive path. Or maybe he was seeing the man in black right there in that room and no one else could see him. Maybe he was like ethereal or something.
That's a cool
maybe
idea.
He was like, everyone thought he was being funny, but he wasn't being funny. He was being possessed by
Johnny
maybe
Cash, but really he's talking, it's like man in black, just heroined out, like Johnny Cash. Just
and it was like it was his only reference to the man in black because he doesn't
yeah.
know Walter. He sees a man in black who could look like Johnny Cash.
Yeah, but he's like man in black
That's
in
Johnny
his mind,
Cash.
so he's like Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash.
That's a wild thing.
And then you said that finally they ask him, well, who is the man that sang Ring of Fire? And he says something else.
Yeah, he says like, can you imagine he says like Clint Eastwood, like totally wrong. And when they tee him up to say Johnny Cash and he misses it and they just die laughing, like insanely laughing over this basically.
What if my bullshit theory is correct? That could have been, the man in black just found like, okay, I'm out of here. And he left and he like snapped to reality and he just didn't know what was going on.
Wouldn't that be wild? Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And that ties us back in because when everyone's uproariously laughing, it shakes Enrico's his name, I believe. Enrico Balazar's desk because he's right next door, in his restaurant. So it shakes his desk. You find out he likes to build these little card castles. That's kind of his whole thing. He gets really mad at you if, you break his card castle. So that kind of sets us up. Now things are happening. He's like, hey, they're coming. They're on the way. that brings in Eddie Dean. So Eddie Dean walks in. Immediately, they're questioning him. They're like,
but he's confident.
And
this is where things are weird.
Yes. That makes him very nervous. It makes Balazar, because you assume he's going to come in being a little weasel scared, and he's confident. He's like, huh? Like, immediately catches him off guard and makes him a little like,
because Balazar is he's the boss. Yeah. Everyone's scared of Balazar.
Yeah.
And if anyone's going to be the most scared, it should be Eddie.
Yeah.
But Eddie is not.
Yeah.
So is that Roland's influence, or like, it could, like, I don't know. It could be.
Yes.
But so I think it probably is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because he knows that he has the stuff. He knows, hey, I've got the drugs hidden. All's good. They look at Eddie. It's just him by himself.
Right, because he needs to use the restroom. He was going to pull them out. That was his plan.
Yes. So he's like, he looks and he's like, what the hell's going on? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like,
that opens up a whole new, like, dude, if you really want to smuggle drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Eddie's your guy.
Right, yeah. Had things gone beautifully, they would have had a perfect back and forth system with Roland if Roland was on board.
Forget about the Dark Tower. How about being a drug mule for cocaine?
Yeah. So he gets eventually convinces Balazar to let him go get it. He's like, if you'll let me, I will make the drugs appear. And he's like, how? Like, they don't have the bags. It's just Eddie looking at him like, they're not on you, obviously. And he's like, just trust me. I'll make it happen. But I have to go into the bathroom alone. And they're like, okay, go to the bathroom. But Jack goes in with you. And he's like, no, I have to go in alone. So I believe they make Jack go in. He's like, no, Jack goes in with you. So Eddie's plan was going to be great. He was going to walk out with the drugs. Obviously, they'd be like, how the hell did you do this? And he'd be like, whatever. He'd have to explain it. But now Jack's going in there with him. So he's like, what are they going to do? There's no choice. They have to do this. So he goes into the bathroom. And whenever they close the door behind him, whenever you touch someone, they can see what you can see. So he grabs Jack. And as soon as he grabs Jack, Jack can see the door behind him. And Eddie turns and throws Jack through the door into the beach with the gunslinger on the other side.
Well, no, because he goes, well, yeah, so what happens is he's in the bathroom and he's looking in the mirror and then he sees his brown eyes and he turns and looks at Jack. And then Jack looks at Eddie in his eyes where they're brown and then they shift to blue. And then out of Eddie's mouth goes, grab him. And he's going like, and then that's when he
he's caught off guard, like, what the hell? And they grab him and throw him back through the door into the world with the lobstrosities.
All world,
yes, into all
not
world.
Earth, not our world, but all
into
A-L-L.
all world.
Should we just call that midworld?
I mean, midworld is part of it.
All world is everything.
All
right?
world, I believe, is everything.
But he's on midworld.
He's
right?
in midworld. Yeah.
Okay, so
where they're at is midworld.
Okay, so they pull him into midworld.
They pull him into midworld. Basically, lands on the beach. This whole scene to me is just the coolest shit I've ever seen in my life. A gun battle more or less ensues. I believe they feed him to the lobstrosities. They end up like shooting him. I think Roland shoots him. I forget this whole battle.
So he shoots. This is only because I did a little refresher. He shoots at the gun at the moment that Jack tries to fire, and it ends up shooting inside of the barrel and causes a misfire where it explodes off into his face. And so he's thrown off guard.
That's
and
wild.
Then then the lobstrosities grab him and
so
take him
wild.
off. And so he doesn't die, but his face is blood and sinew.
Yes.
There's a hole for which noise is coming out of. Like there's like his face is unrecognizable.
Yeah.
In good old Stephen King fashion. Mm-hmm. And he's gurgling noises because he still is alive. He just doesn't have a mouth to pronounce his words. So there's screaming. And then the lobstrosity basically grabs him. And I want to say there's more. And they all just drag him off in the distance. And he is screaming the entire time, like just gargling, bloody noises from whatever hole is coming out of his face at that time.
Yes.
And it's just excruciating pain.
Yes, exactly. Now,
I wonder what Eddie Dean's smartass brain was thinking at that moment. Like there had to have been like something fucked up in his head. He was like, Karma's a bitch, or like.
Now, as a side note here, I believe before they go into the bathroom, they don't believe Eddie, so they say you have to take off all your clothes before you go into the bathroom in case you're hiding a gun or something. So they make Eddie get completely naked
before he goes in there.
I believe, and all that happens. Now Eddie comes back; he's completely naked in the bathroom, knowing, all right, they're about to come in here because Jack's been gone. They heard some stuff. They're asking for Jack, like Jack outside. So obviously, it's go time. Eddie gets the guns. Roland steps through the door as well into the world. So it's Roland and Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
in Jack's world. So now that Roland's got the aspirin, he's kind of good now. At least the fever's been reduced. He can get up, walk through the door, and come through, which I don't know how he walks through, which is maybe a plot hole now that I'm thinking of it. But because when he first goes through, he's going into Eddie's mind with consciousness, but now he can consciously go through into the world.
Maybe because they both went together, because maybe they pulled out. So whenever they pulled Eddie through the door, because now Eddie and Roland are now conscious in Midworld, watching Jack,
get killed. Yeah.
And so now both of them can go through at the same time, because before it was just Roland.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
And I think there's, when we come to the second door, Eddie leverages Roland's life to go with him, but Roland doesn't let him.
Yeah.
So I think what happens is if they both go through the door, they can both be on their own vessel.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so exactly. So now they come back in, and if you imagine Roland's badass gun skills and Eddie being completely naked, this is whenever Roland starts to see that Eddie may have some gunslinger in him, because Eddie's basically ready to fucking roll. Now Eddie rolls out.
Well, no, because so they're in the bathroom. They're asking for Jack, but he overhears that they killed Henry.
Yes.
And so that was the catalyst.
Yes.
So before, Eddie is still concerned. He's still playing safe because he still needs his brother Henry.
Yes.
But somehow some idiot blares out that they've already killed Henry.
Brother.
Or something like that. And then now he's a raccoon in a corner.
Yes. He goes
So he's
psycho.
like, now there's nothing to lose.
Yes. So he comes out guns blazing, and hilariously enough, Roland makes the point that it's actually it's a hard skill to be able to fight naked. You did well. I guess.
Yeah. There was no shame.
Yeah. No shame.
You weren't covering.
Yeah.
There was no human. When God made Adam and Eve aware that they were naked, that they immediately covered up. It's just a basic human impulse to do.
Yes.
That didn't even occur to him.
Yeah.
The only thing that was on his mind was to kill and survive.
Yes, exactly.
Were the two things
pure gunslinger mode, basically. So he comes out guns blazing. Read the story to get the details, but it gets so badass. A gun battle ensues back and forth. Basically, they start pinning down the opposition with their guns and firing. There's a moment where someone comes in with a freaking automatic shooting at them, and Roland makes the point that you kind of learn more of the backstories. Roland always recommends never shooting an automatic, and if you do, you have to know how to holster it and just spread fire real fast, or otherwise the bullets go everywhere. So that guy ends up just shooting half of the bad guys himself. Roland and Eddie hit the floor. That happens. Now there's a kind of a dust settling moment now, because all this is kind of slowed down for a second, and they say, "Eddie, we got your brother," and they cut off Henry's head and throw it at Eddie. So if you imagine you're hiding behind some wall or something to protect yourself, and all of a sudden your brother's head rolls in front of you, and he's like, "Ah!" He just goes completely nuts. I think Roland even tries to get him to calm down, wait, but it's too late. Shit's going down. They just start firing, kill everybody in the place. The details escape me. We'll have to come back with a battle episode where we give the full details of all the battles, but they basically just fire their way out of the situation, kill everybody that's in that place. And then they stop for a second. Eddie realizes there's sirens coming. At this point they've killed everyone. Balazar, every single person in that place has died. They hear sirens coming, and Roland tells Eddie, you need to come with me into my world, basically. There's nothing left for you here. And I think he just tells him your life's
It's basically he was like, you can come with me, you can stay here and face the consequences, you can come with me. He was like, why do I need to go with you?
Yeah.
He was like, you won't be bored.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's like, well, you won't be bored, I promise you. And there may be, basically tells him there may be a quest, and if we went through,
you might find worth. You might find self-worth.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's and he says something and if we win through, we're gonna be, you're gonna love yourself, basically. So they go through, decide to go back into Roland's world, so they make it into Roland's world. Now this starts the whole thing. At this point, Roland, I believe when he comes back, he's talking to Eddie and he faints, because even though he's had the fever reducer, he still is infected and he needs antibiotics. That's really what he needs. So he goes through in the book, they use this shuffle idea where the cards shuffle while Roland's falling in and out of consciousness. So now they're moving down the beach. Roland comes to for a second, and Eddie's been shooting lobstrosities, and he's like, hey, I think they're getting smarter. They're starting to notice and be a little more aware that, I'm here to kill them, basically. So they're killing this lobstrosity meat, and he's feeding it to Roland to try to keep him alive and keep him healthy. No idea if it's poisonous or not, but what else do you got around that area? So he's killing lobstrosities. They're moving down the beach continually.
And finally, they get to a second door. And this door has the Lady of Shadows on it. Now, when they get to the door opens. This time when the door opens, the view he sees is halfway up and it's rolling. It's just a constant moving. If you would imagine, like, it doesn't look like a normal person's gait. It looks like it'd be like a child's view, and it's just rolling along. And he's like, huh, what's that? Now, it's a department store, which Roland doesn't realize what it is, but they're in a department store, and it's a woman who's grabbing clothes and stuffing them in a purse. And he's like, what's going on? And this time, when he comes into her mind, immediately, they say it's like a bobcat. Like you walk in and it's immediate fight and struggle because she recognizes someone's in here. But remember, the Lady of Shadows is basically a crazy woman, which we'll get into in a second. But he goes into her mind and she just starts fighting back immediately.
Right. What's her name?
Her name is, at this time, I almost said her wrong name.
Trick question.
Her name is Odetta Holmes is her name. So he comes into her mind, and this woman is actually, at the time, it's not even Odetta Holmes.
Yeah, that's what I was actually going to go. Actually, according to my calculations. No.
What's her name?
Detta. It's just Detta.
Just Detta Walker.
So there's
That's
Odetta.
Right.
So, she has some. I guess it would be like dissociative identity disorder.
Yes.
Which basically you have different identities, and each identity, or at least in this case, Odetta, her normal everyday self, her name is Odetta. She is unaware, I think, right, that there is another identity within her, and her name is Detta, and she's basically like Mr. Hyde and Dr. Jekyll, however.
Yeah.
So basically, it's like
Mr. Hyde.
So basically, she has like two different identities that basically play an important role, and that might have come to be because of trauma that she has faced in her life.
Yes.
That we will get into.
Yes. So she has Odetta Holmes, which is the sweet young daughter of a gentleman who created Holmes Dentistry. He created basically a dental product that made them into like the richest black family, I believe, in America at the time. And this is in the 60s that we're dealing with this as well. And then her personality, Detta Walker, who doesn't claim, she's a daughter of none. She's a complete wild, goes to bars and saloons, sleeps with guys if she wants to, or decides not to, and, basically gives them blue balls and then, kicks them in the nuts and runs out of the car. Like, she loves to just mess with men, and she considers herself the bad bitch, basically. So she's Detta Walker, and then there's Detta Holmes. Now, when Roland comes in, he's walking into Detta Walker, not realizing it. And Detta Walker is a complete psychopath who fights him tooth and nail as soon as he gets in there to take over the mind and consciousness of her, which I believe he wrangles her down and gets her mind, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember the details of that one.
So she's in a department store when he comes into her consciousness. I'm trying to remember if it goes into much detail, but I don't believe it does get into much detail. Basically, I
remember a lot of, so there wasn't, at least at this part, and this is where I started to get bored, because they, with Eddie's story and his drawing, you were thrown into a calamity, essentially, right? You were thrown into a wild situation where Roland's life depends on Eddie's survival, right? Because if he doesn't get Eddie, like, Roland just might die there on the beach, right? When he goes to get Odetta, there seems to be like they're more just telling a backstory at this point, because I feel like her drawing really isn't that conflicting, other than the initial fight with Detta to control her body.
Yeah.
And I think that was really the only struggle. And it spends most of the time, what Stephen King used to tell the story of Eddie bringing cocaine over to the aircraft, he spent time really just kind of giving backstory of who Odetta was. And I'm not sure if it talks about her specific traumatic event, but we know that Odetta is son or daughter of the entrepreneur, and she's an active civil rights activist.
Yes.
She just real stand-up citizen, but has this other side that is the complete opposite.
Yeah, and just to give a little more backstory, she was a freedom fighter. She basically went down to a protest march. I forget where. I think I can't remember if Stephen King used a true story or not, or a fictional story, but basically they go down to like a place in Mississippi or something like that, and the police basically jail them. She gets put in a situation where they keep her in jail with no restroom, and they force her to urinate on herself to make her feel like less than. She goes through the throes of being a civil rights activist. Detta, on the other hand, is a racist black woman who does not play around. So Stephen King makes the note that when Roland comes into her mind, she says honky mofo is her like thing. But when she comes into her mind, the first thing she says is like, I realize it's a white man. Like she
she
not
feels
even
the
knowing,
white.
Yeah, she feels it.
Well,
She's like,
I
no,
mean,
it's
he is what he is the son of Eld.
Yeah,
Protector of white, right?
Yeah, it's the white. Exactly.
No pun intended.
White over red, exactly, which becomes a joke later on.
But then again, if they did use Idris Elba, that'd break the system.
Break it all down. Yeah, exactly. How would
she
he
would
have,
just let him? She's
Yeah,
like, man, you handsome bastard. You can be inside me all day.
That would have been an interesting aside for sure. How would they have done that? So yeah, that's the whole thing right there.
Maybe an English accent.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You English motherfucker. That would have been really interesting. So she basically
it's crazy because her character, she's such a good character.
Yeah.
And I love her character so much, but I feel like the way they introduced her wasn't eventful for me. And I was like, this is kind of boring. But she's literally the shit.
She's a badass character, a fantastic character. She's up there in terms of like awesome characters for sure. So her drawing basically, the store clerk sees her stealing all those clothes and she freaks out like, oh my God. I think Roland takes over her mind and they're rolling backwards to the door. She gets in her wheelchair to roll back.
So I think that might have been the first time you said that she's in a wheelchair. You said that she was rolling. You didn't know.
You're right. Yes.
So
forgive me and forgive us.
So before you said that whenever Roland's looking in through the door, he realizes that the height at which he is looking is not very tall.
Yes.
And this is because...
Yes, because she's in a wheelchair and he sees like, he knows what a normal person's gait would look like when you're walking and it's rolling instead. And he's like, that's weird. She happens to be without the use of her legs. I believe both of her legs are cut off at the knees. And she's a thief as well. So he's in a wheelchair immediately.
She's like almost doing this because she's lived such a virtuous life.
Yeah.
And I think she's getting off on the fact that she's doing something.
She does, for sure.
But I'm not sure she's Detta at this point. Like I think
she is
Detta.
Yeah, she is for sure Detta, because when he comes forward, Detta's freaking out. And it's only Detta who steals, but I think it's based on that. I think it is the counterpart to her,
virtue.
Her virtue, exactly. It's like the other evil side. It's her light and her dark side. So Detta basically is freaking out. The store clerk lady catches on. She's like, hey, tries to stop him. Roland rolls her back through into a changing room, but it goes through the door and back onto the beach.
Quickly.
Like
very quickly.
That's their whole arc inside of her world.
And
so
I don't even
do much in her world.
Yeah. And I don't even think that he even gets a hold of her in the mind. Like it's like more like a frantic,
you're fighting a cat on you the whole time. Like,
and you finally make it back and she's still like tripping.
Freaking out. Yeah.
So they get her onto the beach and she's tripping.
Yeah. She's still going crazy. And I forget how they calm her down, if eventually she just stops or what, but Alex can look up the detail on that. But basically that's a very short time of her in their world. It just happened at that department store, but you get your backstory on who Detta is.
And Roland also is that to note that he understands when he went into her mind that there are two identities there.
Yes.
He realizes that there's a constant fight between Detta and Odetta, like who is taking control of her mind.
Yes.
Who the identity is going to assume.
Yes. Now, either at this point or at the third and final door, Eddie Dean tries to get smooth on Roland. Now, when Roland goes into that world, like we mentioned, the his body drops.
Yeah, so actually so this is what happened. So before Roland goes into the second door, Eddie says, let me go through.
Yes, let me come with you.
And then Roland says, no, you're not going to come through. Just wait here.
Yeah.
And then Eddie, emboldened by everything that he's probably seen, maybe still like he's probably reinventing himself, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much time has passed between first door and now, but he basically is like, once you step through and your body goes limp because you like your body just stops, I will cut your throat.
Yes.
And then Roland's like, dude, chill.
Yeah.
Like, just relax. Like, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, like, what Eddie was doing. He obviously is going through some shit.
Yeah, he wants to fix. Like, it's a withdrawal. Yeah,
he
wants to fix. And I think Roland even makes that point.
Oh, that might be what it was. Maybe see if he can find
something,
score something. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's literally, he's like, what do you want to do there? He's like, I'll come back. He starts doing the junkie pleading. He's like, I'll come back with you. I need some time over there. And he's like, Eddie, I think you just want to get your drug. Like that part of your life is gone now. Like he tells him straight up, like you're done with
Only
it.
way
Like,
they do
it's
is cold
over.
turkey.
You know, like it's over. So it's like there isn't hits him with the cold truth, and that's when he's like gambles and it's like, well, when you go over there and like I'll cut your like threatens to kill Roland,
And then Roland perceives that he's full of shit.
Yes, exactly. Roland's like, well, if you do, you do. Like calls his bluff and like
then you'll
moves
die
on. Yeah, and that's the thing too is like he would have cut Roland, the door would have closed, and he would have been on there by himself in a role he's never been in before to fend for himself
With a bunch of lobsters.
with a bunch of love and he's like, good luck, pal. So Roland comes back. They got Susanna in her wheelchair, or not even Susanna, we should say Odetta and Detta in her wheelchair. Now, at this point,
This part infuriated the shit out of me.
so what part is this?
The events leading to the third door.
Yes. Okay.
So
Tell the people.
So whenever Roland has pulled Odetta out through the door, the object for which he was sitting in also got pulled through the door. So they're now pushing Odetta on a wheelchair onto Sandy Beach. I don't know if anyone's ever had a cooler on the beach before trying to pull that thing, but I could probably assure you that a wheelchair is much more inconvenient.
It is not even kind of easy.
So they're pushing at this point. It's Detta who has taken over her body, the vile woman, and she is doing nothing but making their life hell. She's literally thrashing about in her chair. She's making it tumble over. When they're sleeping, she's screaming in the middle of the night so they don't get sleep. Like she's literally trying to be the biggest pain in the ass possible for them. And I know that they were probably thinking about, need to kill her or something, because she's completely a liability at this point.
Yep.
But yeah, so this goes on for I don't know how many days. And it is noteworthy that Roland still has not got antibiotics, nor has he had. I think they actually did get a stash of aspirin or fever reducer.
They got the aspirin.
Yeah, they got like a bottle of it.
Yeah,
but they're running out.
Yes, and they're not. Yes, they're running out, and it's not keeping him alive. It's just reducing his fever. So
Right.
he still makes the point, like he still is, like okay.
There's like his wounds are
That's
now
what
like
it is.
pussy.
Yes.
It's like inflamed and red, and you can see the infections going down his arm.
Yeah, you're literally seeing your veins hot, like moving through your arm. It's like okay,
Yeah,
like,
like
even with the fever down, like I'm clearly dying.
Yeah.
You're like slowly dying, dude. And as a big note, so once they get onto the other
Which
side,
means that Eddie's doing all the physical labor at this point.
yes. And once they get onto the others, exactly, that's a big part of it too. But as a big note, once they get onto the other side, immediately it's Susanna that comes out.
Really?
Susanna comes out when they get onto the other side. So
From the second door?
from the first, yes, the moment they come through the second door, I'm like 99% positive it's Susanna because
It's not.
they definitely before
not
they
what
get to the third door, Susanna's already come out because Eddie's already met her at that point.
Well, no. So,
On the beach, he meets Susanna before they even get to the pusher because he
No,
warns.
he met Detta. No, Detta. So he likes.
I mean, not Susanna. Why am I saying fucking Susanna? You can cut this out of all that because Susanna's a giveaway. But he meets
No one's gonna know.
Odetta. He meets
Yes.
Odetta. Yes. Sorry.
So I was like,
I'm like, no, he meets her. Okay, fucking Susanna. No one even knows what Susanna. You should know that name by now. So
It'll all come together.
Yes, but Odetta comes out on the other side of the door, and they're like, "What?"
meets the nice her.
Yeah, meets the nice her. So
virtuous.
now Roland's like, "What? What is?" Like he realizes immediately, "Oh my god! Like this person does have a multiple split personality." Odetta is the sweetest woman in the world. She's this very calm, very well spoken, very nice woman. And she's like, where am I? What's going on? She literally has that disassociative issue where she makes up reasons for why things are happening the way they are. So she doesn't ask herself, like, why was I in a department store? It's just, well, I guess I was doing, she makes up some kind of excuse to kind of rationalize the other person in her mind. So immediately they say Eddie starts to fall for it when he starts to meet her. Like, he's like, wow, like this woman's beautiful. He just starts to fall in love with her. But every now and then, Odetta will rub. I'm going to do this for the whole time.
Once we get past book 2, we'll be good.
Yeah.
Or the third
book
door.
like 5. Yeah.
No, their third door. Will
Oh,
be
it is
good.
book. Yeah, it is third door. So she starts to rub her head, and when she does, that's Detta coming back in her mind, and for a moment she'll like lean her head down.
It's a mannerism.
It's a mannerism. She'll like lean her head down and like close her eyes, and then Detta will come up and be there. So at certain parts of the story, as they're getting towards the third door, it takes a while between door 2 and 3. They go through all these moments, all these issues where Detta, basically while they're pushing her, she tries to throw herself off and make it harder to push her. She starts laughing at him, making fun of him.
Honky muffas.
Honky muffas. There's a part though where things get real and Roland starts to realize what he's dealing with, where he goes to bed and Roland I don't think we discussed this in the first book, but Roland has the ability to let himself fall into like the first layer of sleep, if you will, like before falling into the deepest sleep. So whenever he's trying to fool someone or get a little bit of rest, he can put himself in that first layer where he's still conscious of what's happening around him, even though he is actually resting. So he realizes Detta is so smart that she can basically be aware if he was trying to fake it. So he allows himself to just fall asleep enough to try and catch her because she's trying to kill them too. They know that she's up to no good. So Eddie, of course, is new to this world and new to this whole idea of being a gunslinger. He's not that yet. So he goes to sleep. Roland lets himself kind of fall to sleep for a moment. As soon as he feigns sleep, Detta gets up, rolls out of her chair, and grabs the gun to shoot. She shoots and it clicks.
Misfire.
Clicks again, it misfires. And then she decides to just swing the gun. Roland comes to and stops her. You know what? Roland decides to teach Eddie a lesson and lets her bash him over the head the first time, I believe, to teach
Eddie
him.
or Roland?
Roland teaches Eddie a lesson, and I believe he lets her bash her over the head so that it teaches him, like, dude, do not play around with this woman. Like, lets him, like, learn a lesson.
Like, I know you're macking, but there's a part of her that's not
psychotic.
controlled. Yeah.
I believe he lets that happen there at that point. I can't remember if he let it happen or he was like, I should let it happen, but I'll stop it. But basically teaches them a lesson, like, look, she's trying to kill us, dude. When it's her, like, she wants us dead. Do not play around with this girl. So you get little moments throughout this whole scene. This is a long scene of them pulling her along to the third door. Now, when they finally get to the third door, it's Detta at the time. And they're both tired. They've been staying up late, trying to make this thing happen, trying to get all the way to this door. And you'll fix it up.
Yeah, so at this point, they're trying to get to the third door. Whenever Detta comes out and assumes the body, she's basically causing so much grief, not allowing anyone to sleep. Roland needs to sleep because he's got an infection, but he can't. He's still having to walk miles on the beach, which leaves Eddie to push the wheelchair by himself. So with Roland being fatigued with fever and walking, and with Eddie probably detoxing still and pushing a wheelchair in the sand, they're both really tired. And when it's nighttime, Detta doesn't let them sleep because she screams in the night. Eddie at this point fears that there is a large feral cat hiding somewhere in the mountains that's on the other side, on the other side of where the water is. Like, they're walking along this beach. On one side, you look, it's the ocean. The other, it looks to be like little mountains. And they're walking on the sand in between the two. And so Eddie's, thinking that there's like some crazy bobcat in the mountains that's trying to kill him. So he's, probably losing his shit at this moment. Like, nobody is in any position to go on a trek, let alone under a fever, lack of sleep, pushing a wheelchair, with Detta causing them all sorts of troubles. And so it's at this point where, so go ahead.
Yeah. So at one of the points of them obviously sleeping, trying to work out sleep on shifts, they both fall asleep. Roland's obviously the only one here who's got any bit of grit or understanding of the severity. And Eddie's falling in love slowly with Susanna Dean. They have some moments, with Eddie's falling in love with Odetta Holmes. So at one point they have a moment where they speak under the stars, and they have this little moment where they literally like fall for each other. They do the little starlight, starbright, see my star tonight, like one of those really like cheesy, gooey love moments where they're falling for each other. And I think he even tells her he loves her at that point. But so he's obviously fallen for this girl.
Such a good guy.
Even though she's still going back and forth between being Detta. One of the nights they go to sleep.
You know what that is?
What's that?
That's, what's the Greek word? Agape? Unconditional love.
So they've had their moment. They swore they're in love with each other. They're rolling along. Roland is getting worse and worse.
Stephen King was ahead of the time, man.
Yeah, he really was, right?
Throwing them interracial relationships.
Exactly.
Early on, baby.
Beautiful. They eventually realize, okay, we've got to get into the nitty gritty here. Roland is injured. He can't make it any further. He can't walk on his own. They decide to go forward, Roland pushing Susanna to find the door because they have to sit Roland down. They get him where he needs to be. Like, let's go find the door real quick to make sure it's X amount further, and then we'll come back for you. So they run forward. He's pushing Susanna as fast as he can. They're basically in crisis mode at this time. And they know if Roland dies, like, they're stuck on this world with no help and no knowing of anything. So they're rolling along. They eventually find the door. He's like, oh my God, we found it. I've got to go back and get Roland. So he gets basically the only idea at this point is I have to push him in your wheelchair. Like, that's the only way to get him back here because I can't carry him the whole way. So Susanna says, I'm okay. Leave me here. Now, of course, Kat throughout the story leading up to this. So Eddie's scared now. And he's like, so Eddie decides, I've got to leave you the gun if I'm going back. Like, you have to have this. And I believe Odetta feels weird about holding a gun because she is so nice and so sweet that she was kind of nervous about doing it all together. She decides to take the gun. He runs back with the wheelchair, gets rolling. Now they're flying back as fast as he can. And when he gets back, there's no Odetta. Yeah. She's gone.
I think at this point, you know that Detta is now starting a plan. She's now planning something.
Yes.
Okay.
So now, if you imagine it, Detta is somewhere in the mountains next to the door. If you imagine the door's here, they found the door off into the mountains. Detta's hiding somewhere. They can't see her. They know she's out there.
She's camping right now.
Yes, they know she's out. Now Eddie becomes nervous at that point, and he's like, maybe the cat got her.
He's all like trying to plead her innocence. Like she's innocent. The cat got
and
her.
Roland is so mad. He's like, you idiot! You gave Detta a gun. She means to kill us. I believe is exactly how he says. Like, she means to kill us. Don't you get it? So now he tells him, you need to be alert. I'm going to go into this door, but you have to be alert. Like, she's out there. She's ready to get you, dude. Like,
I feel so bad for Eddie.
Because he's in love? Or
well, there's the whole situation.
What do you mean?
Well, yeah, that's a whole other element too.
Sure.
He's detoxing. He is doing lots of laborious work. He's not getting sleep.
Yep.
And now he thinks that there's a cat out there trying to kill her.
Yep.
He's sworn his unfealty love to this lady.
Yes.
And so now the lady's gone. And through all this, through his tiredness, his fatigue, probably hunger, the love of his life is gone. He's trying to basically convince himself that she is still innocent, but has been taken by this cat or something. Lobstrosity, something.
Yes.
And
exactly.
he's just like tired.
Yes, refuses to believe that it's Detta out to kill him.
I just feel bad for him. He's just in a shitty situation.
All the way around.
And Roland's just like,
you dumbass.
This was your making, boy.
So basically he knows, you let your love get in way, in the way of your mind, basically. So
which is why he probably never puts that in his own situation, Roland.
Knowing, yeah.
Yeah, he probably just like, I'm going to dip in and out, and that's all we have, and I'm leaving.
Yeah, we talked about that in the first one. Roland gets it in, and he...
that's it.
That's it. So that's exactly it. So now Roland's having to go into the third door, which says the pusher. This is an awesome part of the story, but at this time, he tells Eddie, be alert. So now Eddie, sitting there waiting, he's standing up at first, and then we'll just give that part of the story while Roland's in the door, starts getting tired, decides to take a seat in the chair. I remember they're working on no sleep. No, they're just as bad as you could be. You think you'd be awake.
It's nighttime too, right? Is it nighttime or day?
It's day, because there's no lobstrosities yet. It's daytime. So he's just sitting there, just watching the door. And then we start to get Detta's side of the story. Now, Detta, we get her perspective. She is in the hills watching. She sees Roland go into the door, and she's like, perfect. I can get this guy. And her plan is, I don't need to kill him yet. I need to get him without Roland knowing, because I need to watch out for him. I can take him for sure.
So the plan is that she is going to use Eddie to get to Roland. She can't kill him because once he's dead, there's no leverage. Like, he'll probably, I can cut some of the awkward silence out, but I think that she's trying to leverage Eddie against Roland.
Yeah.
And if Eddie is dead, there's no leverage. He's just going to kill Odetta.
Yeah.
It's like the ransom. Like, I have this token that you need or want.
Exactly.
That you find value in. Let's make a deal. So she understands that she can't just kill Eddie.
Yeah. Exactly.
So although she probably could and just kill him on the way out. I mean, she really could just kill Roland right there in the door, right? Did all my thing just fall apart?
I don't think she could. I mean, maybe she could. Maybe she could just shoot into the door. But remember, they can't open the door. And as far
it's
as
only Roland.
Only Roland. As far as we know, they can't even go indoors that aren't their own. We don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah, because Eddie can go back into his own door, but who knows if her shot would even go in? Who knows? Maybe Stephen King doesn't give us that to find out. But so basically, we know that Eddie's tired. She can see him dozing. She can see him like sitting in the chair and slowly falling asleep. So she's like, I'm gonna wait for him to fall asleep and I'm gonna get him. Now we'll cut into what happens and come back to that. But now we're inside of the pusher's mind. So this is a guy named Jack Mort.
Real stand-up guy. Real virtuous.
Real stand-up guy. Now, Jack he's a murdering psychopath, basically, but he's also a sociopath more than anything. So he puts forth this front. It reminds me of like American Psycho, where like everyone thinks he's like this like businessman, basically, but on the inside, he's a complete murdering psychopath. So you get a little bit of his storyline. He has this thing in his mind that he calls being a doobie instead of a don't be. And doobies cover the tracks, all the stuff they do, they make sure to be safe. Now, it starts off with Roland, I believe, being able to dig into his mind, and they give us a little backstory. And Jack Mort gets off sexually on pushing bricks onto people's heads from far up in buildings.
Is it that or just killing people?
Well, ultimately to kill them, yes. He pushes things on their head, but also killing people, pushing them in front of trains, whatever it might be. But
so it's the act of pushing something?
The act of pushing, he is the pusher, right? So,
and I think also that there might have been a mention that he gets off on the fact that one small action will ripple misery in other people's lives. Okay. I think he likes the fact that killing someone, it's not even really the act of killing.
Yes.
It's the knowing that he took an action that a lot of people felt.
Yes.
And so he was getting off that he was having all these, expanding webs of misery that was going out.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. He's a terrible he's like the darkness. So a scene that's happening, it goes back and shows a little bit of his history, and late, years ago, he's in a building, and he's so clever. He is what he calls his doobie versus don't be. What he does is he dresses up as a hobo, goes into a building up to the very top, waits for someone to walk by. He sees a family coming down the street. He pushes a brick off this super tall up building. It lands and hits this girl in the head. He gets so excited, he literally comes in his pants. He runs down the stairs, and Stephen King, of course, giving us
this is a memory that he's picked up on.
It's a memory
so he's not watching.
It's giving us backstory.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
he's not watching yet. It's giving us, I think, backstory about who Jack Mort is. I don't think Roland's seeing this. It's just telling us about him. So we find out, and of course his move is he makes sure to look like a hobo. He runs down. He even puts like alcohol on his clothes. So if he bumps into anyone, if anyone thinks they saw someone, they're like, it was just another homeless person. So he's that detailed about making sure he's not seen at the scene of his crime. So that gives us a little bit of knowledge about who he is. Now, when Roland comes into his mind, we find out he was just about to push a little kid into traffic.
Who's that kid?
That little kid was Jake.
From
book one.
Yeah, the Jake that we talked about in book one.
Now, we know Jake dies. This is going to lead us into some stuff into book three, but we know Jake dies for sure in book one by being pushed, sent into Roland's world through death.
Right.
Now, that just didn't happen in that moment, because when Roland comes to, a flash, just like we talked about with Eddie, there's a quick moment of quick, it's literally a few seconds, but in those seconds, he was going to push Jake, and all of a sudden, Jack senses something's up. He senses something in his mind. And though Detta was a psychopath who fought, Jack is a scared little bia, and it's like, oh my God, what's good? So he starts freaking out, becoming all kinds of scared and nervous. Who's this in my mind? Roland comes forward and basically grabs him, knowing that he's a pusher, that he meant to push him, and tells him basically, hey, listen, I forget what he tells him, but he's taking over his mind at that point to, tell him that he needs to get drugs. So Roland needs to get,
so before we go there, does Roland know who Jack was about to push? This time.
I don't think he knew that it was Jake, but he must have if he saw him. I don't remember him mentioning
the back of his head. And second,
I don't think
was
he knew.
Was that the time that he was going to push him? And what would be, because there seems to be, because I remember there was thought no, not today. Today's not the day, where he was going to kill people and he's going to do it, and then he talks himself out no, not today. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. It's almost like he's edging the murder. You know what I mean?
Maybe that was the case. Maybe that's how it was. But I feel like even possibly Roland comes into his mind and he sees him about to push Jake. And then he comes forward to stop him. Okay, so it may even be something like that.
Okay, so that probably was the moment that Jake was going to die. That was the event that was going to send Jake into book one.
Yes, that was definitely what was going to bring Jake to book one. But now we see
that Jake has now been spared.
Yes, and will continue on in his New York and Jake's win. His story will continue on in that direction. So he'll never, at this point, technically never meet Roland in that way, which brings up a whole really interesting thing in book three. So he comes forward. Jack Mort freaks out. Basically, Roland grabs him and knows that he's a sniveling little BS. So he's like, hey, I need you to do this for me. We have to get penicillin. Eddie tells him what he needs to get, which is, I think he actually reaches in Jack Mort's mind to know the name of the antibiotics, to remember correctly, but Keflex is what they call theirs. And then basically also wants to just get all the supplies he needs. I want to get bullets. I need everything I need. He just wants to get what he needs from this guy. And he tells Jack, if you let me do what I need, I'll let you live. Otherwise, I can grab your thumb right now and shove it into your eye. And Jack realizes he has control over his body. So he's like, okay, I'll do everything you ask me. So Jack, even though on one side he's this killer, this murdering psychopath who Roland realizes that's who he is, he's still a scared little Bia when it comes down to it. He's like, I don't want to mess with you, basically. So does what Roland tells him to.
I just want to say from this point forward, whenever Roland is controlling Jack, this is literally a Grand Theft Auto. Like, this literally is so like cool. from this part to the end of their interaction is literally a 30-minute Grand Theft Auto episode.
It really is.
If you sat down and said, I'm gonna play Grand Theft Auto for 30 minutes and not necessarily do a mission, but just mess around in the open world.
Exactly.
This is exactly what it would look like.
It's so true. And that's, to me, this is why book 2 is just so strong, dude. Because book 1, in the beginning of book 2, you get Eddie's scene. That's this like mob style shootout after like a drug smuggling.
Yeah.
Then you get Susanna's like civil rights story, which is a cool like kind of like side moment of relaxing. And then back to book 3, he just gets nuts all over again. Or door 3 gets nuts. So now he's got Jack.
So the beginning of the playthrough, you go into the ammunition store and you're like, what I would do in the Grand Theft Auto?
Gotta get some
let's get some ammo. Let's get some guns.
Yeah,
and then he gets the antibiotics.
Yeah, so this beginning part kind of sets us all up. He gets in Jack Mort's mind, controls it, kind of literally plucks the information he needs because Jack keeps trying to hide stuff from him, and he's like, I need to know where to get stuff. So he goes in his mind and takes out everything he needs.
So he ends up going to the gun store, right?
Yes.
And you need ID.
Yes.
To get
and a permit,
mm-hmm. which he doesn't have.
Yes.
I forget what he does, but he ends up like causing a scene.
Yes.
And he's like,
he drops his wallet, and this is just Roland being clever and also taking stuff out of Jack Mort's mind to kind of understand how to do this. Drops his wallet, kicks it underneath, like, at your local pawn store or whatever. There's going to be a cash register area. He kicks it under that area, and then goes out and tells the police, hey, this guy just tried to stick me up when I was just trying to buy stuff. He literally stole my wallet.
Yeah.
The police come back in now. So he's got 2 police officers, and the guy already had dealt with Roland and was like, what? He's like, no, like he was kind of a douchebag. Like, now the guy himself, strangely enough, is part of Enrico Balazar's whole team in some kind of way. He's like a lackey for Enrico Balazar. So he doesn't want any smoke with the police. So he's got to be a little, he's got to be scared of the police when they're trying to, and they know who he was. So they're like so happy. They're excited. Like, we're going to get this mofo now. Like, they think they get the chance to go get him. So that's why they're like, oh, really? Like, tell us what's going on. They walk in and he has them look. He's like, oh my God. He's like, look, my wallet's right there. So they see the wallet and they're like, we got you now. They're like, we got you now, dude. So he has to get the wallet out, goes down. To my recollection,
I'm pretty sure he just nabs guns.
Well, yeah, what he does is
throughout the commotion.
And in my mind, I'm almost wondering why he needed the policeman to do this, because what he does is he has the cops look down, and when they go look down, he smashes both their heads together. Roland does this, controlling Jack Mort, smashes both their heads together and knocks them out. Now, I don't remember why he needed to do that. It's like, why not just beat up the first guy and take it anyways? But he smashes both their heads, gets the bullets. He asks them for the bullets he needs.
Maybe to show him that he ain't fucking around.
I guess so.
Like I'm not just.
But there's a reason for it, and I'm like, why did he do that? There's something in the story. Or for some reason, he smashes these cops' heads together.
He's like, I'm willing to smash cops' head together to make you look like you stole my wallet. Now, if you don't give me a gun,
yes,
I will do worse. Like, these are upstanding citizens. Yes. You're a piece of shit. I will do it. Maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to rationalize that.
Yeah, because he gets what's called a shooter's Bible, which Roland loves the name of that. But the shooter's Bible has the bullets he needs. And he's like, how much do these cost? And the guy's like, oh, those are, $20 for a pack of like 60. And Roland's like, 60? They can't believe there's this many you get this many bullets. He's like, that's more than enough we're going to need.
You love Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's like, I can't believe this is, how many bullets I can get. And I think the guy can give him the bullets, but not a gun or something like that. And he's like, you have to have an ID, maybe even to get the bullets. And I don't know why he didn't just...
He ends up getting a gun, though.
Right. Maybe he does it to...
Maybe he takes it from the police officer.
He does take a gun from the police officer.
Okay, maybe that's how he gets it in.
But I'm wondering if he ends up having multiple guns, but I'm wondering if he does that to get him to bring the bullets out, because the guy wasn't going to bring him out. So he tells them like he was supposed to sell me bullets, and maybe the guy goes, I don't know. For some reason, he gets the police, cracks them over the head, gets the bullets. So now he's got all the bullets he needs.
And all the guns.
And all the guns he needs. Hops in the car. Now it's time for round two.
What car?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hops in the cop car.
Hops in the car. Steals
a cop car.
Okay, steals a cop car.
Now it's round two.
And makes... Oh, my God. This is all like recording what I'm saying.
Getting the phone memo.
Yeah. Goes into the cop car, steals it,
Yes.
makes his way over to the pharmacy.
Yes.
And this is another example of how Stephen King will drop like a little mini story inside of the big story. The pharmacist is on the phone about, refilling a medication. The guy's pissed off on the phone because the pharmacist can't refill it.
Yes.
And then in barges Jack Mort, because this is all in the perspective of the pharmacist, I think.
Yes.
So you're reading it and you're now the pharmacist.
Yes.
In comes Jack Mort in a in a frenzy. And he's basically like, I need antibiotics. And he's like, oh, you need a doctor's order or a script. And he can't get it filled. And then basically he pulls out the gun that he took from the cops and holds the guy, hostage.
Like,
Give me antibiotics or I'll kill you.
Yes.
So the scared pharmacist ends up giving him the antibiotics. And then I think that when he goes outside, he is met with more police.
So here's what happens. Before this is one of another cool parts, because Stephen King just knows how to give the good stuff. So whenever they walk in, if you imagine like at this CVS, there's an very old security guard who's there, old man who's been working there, finally almost on his retirement.
I'm 2 days away from retirement.
Just about to let go. And he comes in. Roland pulls a gun as Jack Mort, and he's like, I need the Keflex. Now, the guy is still scared. He's still caught off guard for a second. Roland sees, if you remember, there's those little like mirrored security cameras where it's like a camera behind that kind of circle mirror. So there's one of those. Roland gets an eye on that and sees a security guard coming up behind him. And the security guard makes the point that he's never seen anything this fast. But Roland wheels on his heel, shoots the gun out of his hand, and turns right back at the guy. So you imagine you're walking up on this guy. You pull a gun out to stop this suspect. Boom, like shot out of your hand, dude, like in a heartbeat. Flips around, shoots it out of his hand, turns back at the guy. That guy gets scared and he's like, okay, here's the Keflex, here's the stuff. So he gives him the stuff. And it's two people. It's a young kind of, they say he's like a young, like freckled faced kid who works for this guy. And then it's the older guy. So they're in there. He tells him to give him the stuff. He gives him the stuff. Now, as he's coming out, the two cops are on the way now. They got, I guess, a call in. They get there.
Yeah. Well, they now are aware that someone's armed.
Yes.
And so now the cops mean business. You're not just catching them, unawares.
But it's the guys whose head they knocked too.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, which I don't know how they get back there. I guess they get into another car or something. But now they've heard that they had a report of the shooting happening there, so they roll up. So as he's leaving, they come in, and if you remember, they have like a shotgun that they shoot with people in there. So Roland even makes the point that he's like, what's wrong with these? Like, these guys aren't gunslingers. They're like morons because they're shooting into a crowd of people in a Walgreens, basically, is what it is. So he's shooting at him. If I remember, they decide to hit the deck, and it's like a funny story how like the pharmacist hits the deck and his little nerdy lackey like jumps on top of him and like breaks his jaw. Like he makes like a random point that like he gets his jaw broken by his kid who like works underneath him because he's so scared. So they're hiding, they're shooting guns all over the place. I don't even think Roland shoots them. I think he just like shoots the tires or something, or somehow escapes. They're like, he still doesn't kill the cops. And then of course in pure Stephen King fashion,
because he understands that they are in a sense supposed to be gunslingers of their world.
Yes.
But he's saying they're individual as a person. They're not worthy of the title for which they hold.
Yes, exactly. So he's giving them the respect to not kill them, basically. And then Stephen King gives you a fun story on the side where years later, one of those cops is watching Terminator in a movie, and he remembers the eyes of the Terminator, and they make him think of the gunslinger. So he jumps up in the middle of the theater and says, "That's him. That's the guy." And he has a heart attack and dies right there. Because that's in the book. Yeah,
I don't remember that.
Yeah, he gets so like, oh my God, he gets scared because it just reminds him so much of Roland's coldness that he sees the Terminator and like literally has a heart attack, jumps up in the movie theater, is like, that's the guy. It just reminds him so much of Roland, heart attack and dies right there in the theater.
Right
so
there, like
it's just
watching
a random,
The Ring for the first time.
Yeah, it's just a random fun side Stephen King decides to throw in. So now he's back in the car. He realizes he has to escape. Roland has a plan in his mind here that Jack Mort doesn't fully know of. Jack Mort is, of course, during this time still freaking out, but Roland's forcing him. He's in control. They realize, okay, he's like, I need to run down to a subway to escape. So at this point, Jack Mort thinks he's going to be running into a subway to try and get away. Now, he parks the car, gets out, he's walking. There's two policemen who catch on and see him, I believe. Now, one of the cops, garbage, another one of those same police who's unworthy of the title, but the other officer is a true gunslinger. He says, hey, freeze, stops. Immediately, Jack Mort starts to run. Roland takes off to try to get to the subway. He shoots, boom, hits Roland. One shot, boom, catches him. Roland falls on the ground. He's like, wow, got him. You know, it's first shot. I think they say even says like the first time you ever had to shoot somebody. So he's walking up to the body, but they make a note that Roland's like, he knows like this is something that you'll learn down the road, but a shot doesn't mean you're dead, basically. So it hit Mort's Zippo lighter. So when they flip Mort over, there's smoke coming out of his chest. And he's like, what is that? Like he kind of catches like smoke and fire, like because he hit a Zippo lighter on his chest.
That's right.
And it's smoking. All of a sudden, Jack Mort comes up, kicks the guy over, knocks him out. Roland looks at him and even says something to him, I think, before he runs off, like, you have the heart of a gunslinger. Like, says something like that to him. Like, gives him, like, a prop of some sort.
Yeah.
And then runs down into the thing on fire because the bullet hole caught the Zippo lighter on fire. So now there's a man on fire holding bullets, Keflex, everything he needs, running down the subway station like just a crazy person on fire.
It was like
what the shit?
It was like the scene from Return of the King when he lit himself on fire on the oil. And he runs off.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You can see a crazy man running down the subway, the subway stairs. Sticks the Keflex in his underwear, sticks the bullets in his underwear. Literally, they say like it's in his underwear because he's on fire. He's having to rip his clothes off while he's running. Runs forward, and ties us into the part where we learn that Jack Mort, as a pusher, pushed a brick over on the family that I mentioned earlier. That family happened to be Odetta Holmes' family. The brick hit Odetta Holmes and split her consciousness at that point. She was unconscious, I believe, for like days, and when she came to, Detta was a part of her at that point.
Yeah, probably traumatic brain injury and messed her stuff up.
So Jack Mort has at this point pushed Odetta, pushed Jake as well. And we learn at this point, he also pushed Detta to make her lose her legs. So after she'd been through all this stuff already, having been pushed once, we learned that Odetta was waiting for a sub one day and sitting down there waiting for the subway to go. And someone pushed her onto the tracks and she had her legs run over by the sub. So she lost her legs at the knee. And at the time, they even mentioned whenever the people try to come get her, they're like, something's wrong with her because the EMT who comes pulls her out. They're in the EMT on the way, and she keeps passing out and coming back in between Odetta and Detta. So she'll pass out and come forward as this like sweet woman, like, what's happening? He's like, ma'am, you've been in a terrible accident. She'll pass out and come forward like, what are y'all dying? Trying to kill them because it's Detta. So she's literally going back and forth, going through this thing. So I can't remember if they say that was the moment she split or if it was when the brick hit her head. But either way, we learned Jack Mort has pushed Detta twice and has was supposed to kill Jake. But now, obviously, Roland stopped that from happening in this time. So basically, Roland decides to give him his just desserts. So he's running down with the subway. Jack Mort realizes what's happening, but it's too late. He's screaming, telling him to stop. Roland's like, shut up. Like, I'm not listening to you. A subway's coming. He runs all the way down, jumps right in front of the subway. Now, as this is happening, back in Midworld, Detta is trying to take out Eddie during this time. Eddie starts to doze off. Detta sneaks up on Eddie. Eddie's dumb, loving, sad ass gets him fully, catches him with the gun. I think she makes him tie himself up.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
She ties him up and basically is
and hog
feed
ties
him. Yeah, feed him to the lobstrosities.
Yes, is her plan. Exactly.
Because I think now it's nighttime.
Yes, that's exactly it. And and this part actually made me I felt it because she hogtied him to where it was around his throat and his legs. So if you imagine you're on your stomach with your legs up and that is going around your throat. So if you let your legs stretch out, it pulls your neck and chokes you. And I remember reading that and the way he described it, it actually made my it made me hard to breathe. I was like, oh, that would suck so much, dude. So he has her in this crazy hog tie and she has him in this crazy hog tie. And basically Roland comes back. She's got Eddie by the side of the door, hog tied up. and Roland's coming back. And I believe Roland saw this happen. I believe he looks back and realizes like it's gonna happen.
But he's
now.
trying to like get Mort onto the track.
Yes.
So he's like trying to hurry up and wrap this shit up.
Yes, exactly. So Roland decides to run forward, push Mort, jump him in front of a train, and at the same exact time, he jumps backwards to run out.
Yeah.
So Detta, having Eddie held, is getting ready for Roland and looks through the door. And when she looks through the door, she sees what Jack Mort sees, which is the train coming at her. So she has like a uncoupling of her mind,
like a catharsis.
Yeah, of like seeing all of those things happening. This is the person who caused you to be split in the first place. So at the moment, what I believe the book says is Roland looks backwards and sees Detta, but Detta actually splits into two people. So for a moment, he sees like almost like what her mind actually is, and sees the two people as he's jumping back through. Mort gets killed by the train. Roland jumps through back into his world. Quickly enough, I believe, if I remember, he grabs a gun, shoots the lobstrosities that are coming.
And I believe he's going to kill her.
Yeah.
Like he's already, like he's saving Eddie.
Yes.
Because that was the most immediate danger.
Yes.
And
yes. He was just
like,
about to get killed by a lobstrosity.
Yeah. And then finds that because of this event, Detta and Odetta have split and then have come back too.
Yes.
But to become someone else.
Yes. So they've now become one person.
Now you can say it, Guy.
Yes. Now
you can say
she is Susanna. Now her name is Susanna. So for listeners,
I feel like we were doing our own little like Easter egg. Like, what is this? What is like the red herring that's always there? Like, who's
Susanna?
Who's Susanna? And at the very end, like, there you go. There it
that's
is.
Susanna. So apologies to our listeners. The Susanna was that. Susanna Dean is what she calls herself. So she ties herself to Eddie immediately because she knows she loves Eddie. So she calls herself Susanna Dean, which is Eddie Dean, Eddie's last name. Takes his last name. So you have Odetta, Detta. They now have become Susanna. And that is our new character here in this story. So now that he did that, she's no longer trying to murder them, basically.
So about the couple weeks that we were going through, I was hoping maybe we could forget about that if I just took your last name, Dean.
Right.
Does that make us square?
I'm trying to kill you this whole time. So she comes back, and I believe it ends with them eventually running along the side of the beach. It turns into forest, and they get off the beach side, and now they've made their way into a forest and clearing, and that's how the story takes off.
Does it mention a beam at that point or no?
No, that's book. Where are we? We're book 3. Yeah, that's the beginning of book 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is the story of book 2, the drawing of the 3.
Man.
So to me, when you think about all the stuff in that book, I'm like, bro, come on, dude. That's
You know what? It's funny you say that because now that after
freaking
I talked about that, I was like, man, I think maybe I just need to go ahead and read it again.
do me a favor and listen to the audiobook. Just get Frank Muller doing Detta's black voice is the best. Dude.
You motherfucker.
It's the
I remember
best,
hearing that, and I think he was the one who did Wolves of Color, right?
I believe
Same
he did.
guy?
I believe he did Wolves too.
Because she kind of Susanna in the future kind of does like little like callbacks to Detta, like because Detta, you know, there's always a part of it, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But in a way that it's more controlled. So it's like a secret power that she taps into.
Yes, exactly. And what's
without
cool
getting
is
too spoiler.
and Detta still does have love for Eddie because like she is cohesive. At that point. So
it's like symbiotic instead of parasitic at this point.
Yeah, so she still does have like it's kind of cool how it's like she's crazy, but she still does love Eddie and still does like still follow Roland and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think after talking about it, it really is a good book. It really is. Certainly much better than The Gunslinger.
Oh yeah.
As I said before, I feel like if anybody wanted to read the series, I feel like they could probably, and I know a lot of people would disagree. They could probably just
have to read it.
You have to read it.
The followers of the tower would say, of the beam would say, you have to read. But for
someone that you know, someone like me who it is a big task to read. Mm-hmm. I feel like I am a slow reader. And so when someone is like, you have to read something, but the first book is not as good.
Yeah.
That is a soft check for me because it's like, it already takes a lot for me to read a book. I don't want to spend, you know, a couple months feeling like this is a chore to do to get to the good part. And I would say if you're one of those out there who do that, you could probably watch a summary on it. with pretty accurate events on there,
Yeah.
and then get right into book 2. But you definitely should read book 2, like read from there on.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, no. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was a pretty good book. Definitely 7.7, 8.
That's for all who don't know that's the equivalent of my 9. All right?
I'm a harsh rater.
Yeah. So wait, what do you give? You said Song of Susanna is your favorite. What do you give that for your rating?
I give it like an 8.5, dude.
That's all right. And that to me is like a straight up 10 right there. So that's good. Okay.
But see, a lot of people didn't like, the later books, and I don't know why. I feel like people who consume media are too entitled. Like they feel as though the author owes them something.
Sure.
And that's not true. Like you're engaging in the story that they made.
Mm-hmm.
You accept it for what it is. You have no say so.
Yeah.
If you want to make a story and you want to go through it, way you do it, make your own story.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with that.
Like, oh, he should have did this. No, he shouldn't have. He should have did exactly what he intended on doing.
Right. That is what it is. And you take that as whether you like it or you don't, but that's it. There's nothing more to it.
But yeah, that was good. Well, thank you for the Drawing of 3 episode. There's nobody else that I would consider doing that, maybe because I don't know anybody else that's read it. But yeah,
we're the 2 nerd companion Dark Tower aficionados, if you will.
But you're my homeboy, and I don't think there's anyone else better to do it with.
I wouldn't do it with anyone else, my man. I appreciate that. And I appreciate y'all listeners for hopping on.
Would you swear your soul with me under some stars?
Would you?
I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Do you wish yourself upon a star?